His eyes scanned her, and he said, like he was thinking out loud, that he knew her from somewhere. Eugenia froze. All she could think was, how did things get this messed up? Cold as ice, he accused her of snatching innocent kids. It happened a while back, at the Keratin estate. The maids were whispering, all bent over, about how the Marquis and his wife vanished into thin air. Super creepy. She gracefully reached for the shiny gem, holding up the heavy curtain by the old window. Then, quick as a flash, she slipped the gem into her sleeve. Only she knew the awful truth. The owners were long gone, and the family was headed for a total wipeout. Eugenia was so sure about what was coming, because this world was just a story she'd read. Her own life had ended so stupidly, from a dumb fall down the stairs. With her last breath, she was totally hooked on the fantasy novel, Unforgivable Sin. Next thing she knew, she woke up inside that very story. Joshua von Keratin, the main character, was the heir to an ancient Marquis family, loaded with history and power. But ever since he was a kid, his life had been one endless string of bad breaks. He hunted down the one who screwed him over, and he was out for some serious payback. The novel just cut off mid-sentence, and this was the exact moment Joshua's troubles started. The workers were complaining. Keratin wasn't paying them, because the Marquises had vanished. Joshua and his twin sister were sent to Selmia. The kids weren't getting fed. Nobody gave a damn about them. That really ticked off Eugenia, so she secretly started cooking for the twins. Ain't no way she'd forget Korean food. Bringing a tray of warm food to the kids' door gave the beautiful woman a sense of relief. She'd been helping the twins for days, but the creepy death rumors kept her from getting too attached. One death's enough. She wasn't ready to kick the bucket so young. Evgenia decided she was ditching the estate with the jewels and starting over fresh. The door burst open, and all the staff were ordered to assemble in the hall. The main character was stoked. The moment had finally arrived. The guy told everyone to shut their traps. He had a major decree from the Duke himself. Ever since the Marquis vanished, his family's been struggling to keep things afloat. The heir's too young, so the Keratin estate is going under the control of the Duke's royal family, which means all you servants are fired. After that bombshell, everyone totally lost it. Evgenia saw it coming, but the bottom line was, they were kicking her out with nothing. Luckily, her jewels were already stashed away safe. Good thing nobody gave a damn about her, so she could finally crash and get some decent sleep. Tomorrow's sunrise meant a fresh start. Evgenia was dead set on ditching this whole destined romance plot forever. The long-awaited morning of the next crucial day had arrived. Her eyes snapped open, blazing with unstoppable enthusiasm and the best, brightest mood ever. Stretching her arms overhead, she whispered, totally satisfied, that she'd finally gotten a sweet, peaceful night's sleep. This morning, with a fragrant hot cup of tea, was truly kind and calming. Just like Evgenia predicted, the servants grabbed the stuff and hauled ass out of the empty estate. So, time for Evgenia to bounce. She swore to start over, wipe the slate clean, with a pure heart, leaving everything behind. Except, inside the hastily packed suitcase, all she found were some basic clothes. A complex mix of surprise, bitter realization, and pure terror flashed across the beauty's face. She started frantically searching the room, desperately trying to find her priceless missing jewels. After a long and fruitless search, the beauty bitterly realized that all her treasures had been ruthlessly stolen. But in this crucial moment, she couldn't waste a single second. The girl rushed from room to room, but unfortunately, found nothing of value in any of them. She urgently needed to grab something, any valuable item at all. Evgenia hurried to the Marchioness's chambers, sincerely hoping to find some valuables there. The previous owner of this cursed body lived a wild life, spending money she just didn't have. The beauty froze when a voice near her suddenly asked if she was in the habit of taking things that didn't belong to her. Whipping around, the main character stared with genuine horror at the person who had unexpectedly entered. Standing right in front of her, arms crossed in a stern pose, was a young, serious-looking dude. Joshua von Keratin, scowling, declared that he wasn't buying any excuses. He grilled Eugenia, asking if she was planning to ditch him too, just like the other servants. In this super screwed-up situation, Eugenia had absolutely no clue what to do or where to turn. Apologizing, she bolted for the exit, but the little dude snagged her dress, stopping her cold. Eugenia begged him to let her go, but Joshua suddenly announced he had something super important to say. The kid was totally wiped, slumped into a chair, and then asked the maid to do the same. but Eugenia politely declined, explaining that her position didn't allow it. Joshua immediately yelled, ordering her to sit down, and the main character instantly obeyed. The young master confessed that he genuinely wanted to thank the maid for feeding them all this time. Eugenia insisted it was nothing, she was just doing her job as a simple maid. The main character added that working for the Keraton Marquis household had always been an honor for her. She was about to leave the house, but suddenly young Joshua called out and stopped her. The young master clearly hadn't said what was troubling his worried heart. "You think commoners can get away with disrespecting nobles?" little Joshua snapped. In that instant, he realized the weight and recklessness of the words he'd just spoken. He quickly said that wasn't what he meant, because she hadn't laughed at them like the other servants. Eugenia clearly sensed the little guy's desperation, so she decided to hear him out one last time and offer support before leaving this estate forever. She knelt down in front of him and whispered with a warm smile that it was okay, and he could talk. The kid, voice trembling, confessed the Duke's knights could snatch him and his sister from the estate any day now. They wouldn't be able to fight back, and those guys would control their lives however they pleased. Joshua also knew for a fact that in a situation that messed up, nobody would genuinely care about them. So, to avoid that awful fate, the twins desperately needed the maid's help. With unconcealed pleading in his shaky voice, the young master begged Eugenia to become their legal guardian. Hearing this truly shocking news, the beauty froze, her mouth dropping open in stunned surprise. The girl immediately asked, confused, if she'd heard right, but Joshua assured her she heard him loud and clear. He decided to repeat his request one more time, and hopefully asked Eugenia to listen carefully. Hearing the request again from the young master's lips totally threw the main character into deep shock. The beauty tried to explain that a simple maid like her would find it incredibly difficult to pull something like that off. Eugenia couldn't grasp how desperate Joshua was to ask a simple maid for something so impossible. In this messed up situation, instead of making lame excuses, she decided to lay it all out for Joshua. Taking care of him and the young lady and staying hidden from the Duke, that takes serious cash. But Eugenia hadn't seen her measly paycheck in months, not even a red cent. If the young masters get sick or hurt, she wouldn't be able to pay for a doctor or get them medicine. Joshua totally got what Eugenia was trying to tell him. The main character was about to add something really important, but a sudden wave of sympathy washed over her, and she couldn't say a word. Instead, Eugenia bowed respectfully and sincerely apologized to the young master for not being able to help. It wasn't her who was supposed to take the kids. It was Eileen Blair, the youngest daughter of that bankrupt baron's family. Because of that, Eileen never found a match in society, and when she got older, she dedicated herself to the humble work of being a governess. Eventually, she found a place in the respected Keraton Marquis's house, where, teaching the twins, she was able to build a friendly connection with them. However, 6 months ago, with the Marquis's finances getting worse, Eileen was forced to leave her position. Then, Eileen found a modest job as a caregiver for an elderly lady in the backwoods, far from her old life. Hearing worrying news about the Marquis's family, she rushed back to meet with the kids. That's why Eugenia couldn't take on the role of guardian, because otherwise the story would deviate irreversibly from the plot she knew. For this reason, the maid, with a heavy heart, firmly stated that her time here had come to an end and she needed to leave. But suddenly, her ear caught a painfully familiar, alarming ringing, piercing the silence of the estate. The bells were ringing, but Joshua was still here, and Eileen was supposed to have arrived sooner. Eugenia decisively grabbed the young master by the hand and, breathlessly but insistently, asked him to follow her. The kid hesitated, thrown by her sudden rush, but Evgenia was flat out of time for explanations. Inside, the main character could already clearly hear the ominous bell tolling. Imagining herself 6 feet under, in a dark coffin, Evgenia realized she'd be damned if she let that happen. Joshua froze, stunned, when the maid straight up asked if he and his mistress were hiding in some kind of secret shelter. The kid was baffled how Evgenia knew, but she just pressed him, demanding to know exactly where it was. Turns out, when the maid brought meals, she noticed the twins sneakily disappearing in some unknown direction. Mustering his last bit of courage, the boy asked in a trembling voice if she would become their guardian if he told her the whole truth. The main character frantically grabbed her hair, desperately fighting agonizing doubts and inner conflict. Finally, she nodded decisively and, gritting her teeth, told the young master to hurry up and move forward. A radiant smile lit up the child's face, but Evgenia had already made up her mind. When Aileen came, the children would go with her. Joshua grabbed the blonde's hand, blurting out all excited that he trusted her completely. The secret hideout was super close, just a short walk straight ahead, and then around the next corner. Soon they were there. The kids stopped at a plain wall and said all mysterious-like that this was where everything was hidden. The main girl raised an eyebrow like, seriously? This secret hideout was in such an obvious spot? Meanwhile, the kid was busy, fiddling around real quick, and the secret hideout slowly started to open. Evgenia gasped, totally blown away as a cleverly hidden secret room suddenly appeared right in front of her. Her eyes immediately spotted toys and even tiny crumbs from a cookie that had been eaten. Joshua proudly asked what she thought, but she wasn't impressed. The adults screwed up, and innocent kids are paying the price. The last bell rang, and Evgenia breathed a sigh of relief. Perfect timing, 'cause Aileen was about to show up any minute. Joshua called her name again, and this time, the beautiful woman finally heard what he was saying. She gave him a nervous smile, trying to play it cool, and quietly told the young master that everything was fine. But Eugenia's behavior seemed super weird to Joshua. He even started to wonder if she was really listening. The kids started scolding the blonde for acting so out of line, not understanding why all adults were so confusing. Eugenia's attention was drawn to the delicate face of the sleeping Lady Selmia. Lucky for her, she didn't have to search for the girl long. The young master gently explained that his little sister was sick, so he earnestly asked Eugenia not to wake her. Even before Dad vanished without a trace, Joshua promised him he'd definitely protect Selly. Even though their father wasn't with them anymore, the boy firmly believed he had to keep his word. The main character got lost in thought. Even if this is just a novel, haven't these little kids been through enough already? If she'd taken over the body of a high-class noblewoman instead of a simple servant, would she still be helping these orphaned kids? Joshua jumped, his whole body tensing up, and spun around when he heard a rustling sound right behind him. He gripped the hem of Evgenia's dress, his voice trembling as he confessed his deep fear that she might run away. The main character gently explained that she was standing too close to the sleeping mistress and simply stepped back carefully so as not to wake her. Evgenia decided to move to the other side, and Joshua immediately volunteered to join her, wanting to be close. The young master couldn't understand why the maid was laughing so infectiously, and the main character explained that he was very sweet. After these unexpected words, the kid instantly blushed, and then proudly declared that he wasn't sweet at all, since he was past the age where he'd seem that way. When Aileen arrives, the main character won't get another chance to see the young master's cute face. Sadly, if Evgenia becomes an integral part of the story, something terrible could happen, so it's better to leave. That's exactly what was supposed to happen, but for some reason, Aileen still hadn't arrived, so the heroine decided to wait a little longer. But time was rushing towards dusk, and the long-awaited guest was still nowhere to be seen. Seeing Evgenia's face, all hollowed out and worried, the young master looked at her, a little puzzled. The main character, unable to hold it in any longer, let a single tear escape down her cheek. Right now, she was tormented by one agonizing question. Why hadn't Aileen come back for the kids? Evgenia was starting to freak out for real. She had no idea what to do, because she was starting to think Aileen wasn't coming back at all. The truth was, the young woman really didn't want to take responsibility for the kids, because she was terrified of kicking the bucket again. But if she chickened out right now and ran, these defenseless kids could die all alone. Evgenia turned to the master, a look of determination on her face, and told him firmly that she needed to tell him something really important. She gave Joshua a smile and asked if he happened to have any cash on him. Suddenly, the boy stood up straight, looking determined, and announced with dignity that he didn't want to ask for help for nothing either. Walking over to the sleeping Selly, Joshua carefully reached under her soft pillow. There was clearly something hidden there. Then he pulled out some jewelry with shimmering gems, and holding them out, asked Eugenia to take it all. "Where did you get these treasures?" the main character asked the young master, her amazement obvious. Turns out, Joshua had secretly stashed away his mom's biggest jewels, so the other servants couldn't swipe them. Eugenia couldn't accept them, since they were the only priceless things the twins had left of their parents. Plus, these pieces were intricately engraved with the lily crest, the symbol of their noble family. Trying to sell these would immediately flag them as stolen goods. But right now, in her hand, Eugenia felt a ring with a fake stone. From what she knew, the Marquise got scammed when he bought it. However, the main character just couldn't break that harsh truth to Joshua, not wanting to crush the innocent kid's heart. The child exclaimed that Eugenia should just take them to the Grand Ace Empire, to Duke Heraces's mansion, and then the jewelry would be hers. Joshua pleadingly added that the previous duchess was the beloved grandmother's own sister. The main character gently returned the trinket to the young master. Then, with a wide, encouraging smile, she said that one ring was more than enough for her, which genuinely surprised the kid. Eugenia solemnly promised that she would definitely take the young master back to Duke Heraces's estate. The boy's face immediately lit up, radiating pure, unadulterated joy. The heroes linked their pinkies, solemnly sealing the promise they made to each other in that way. But suddenly, Joshua yanked his hand away and unexpectedly suggested drawing up a written contract immediately. He quickly found a clean sheet of paper in the room and, with a sly, anticipating smile, asked Eugenia to sign it. The main character had a strange feeling like she'd been totally played, and she asked, confused, if she really needed to sign this. Eugenia couldn't hide her genuine shock the moment her eyes landed on the hefty $1,000,000 penalty. "You wouldn't just up and leave us, would you?" Joshua asked with feigned sadness. The main character, totally freaked, hastily signed the contract, just to stop the young master from bawling his eyes out. Then, after dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, she dramatically handed the contract back to the kid. But before letting go completely, Evgenia said, super serious, that she had one major condition. Evgenia wanted the young master to call her his sister from now on, and nothing else. She explained they needed to be ready for anything, any crazy stuff that might happen, so they'd pretend to be siblings. But if he didn't want to, Evgenia would just take off. But Joshua immediately shouted that he was down with it. And then, kinda embarrassed, he called her his sister. Evgenia cheered, saying now they could get ready to leave right away. No time to waste. After what felt like forever on the road, the heroes finally made it to a small village near the border. The heroine had to hawk everything left in the mansion. She needed to find a village where they could slip across the Empire's border. Without a care in the world, the kids were calling each other by their old names, totally forgetting about their new ones, Shushu and Selly. But in the novel, it described how a heartless killer, recognizing the twins, suddenly attacked them and coldly offed Aileen. That's why Eugenia suggested adding a key clause to the agreement. The twins had to pretend she was their older sister. So it was decided to use fake names. Eugenia dropped everything she was doing the second she heard their voices calling out her name. The kid's hair was dark now, but Joshua was only worried about one thing. Would the color wash out for sure? She gently explained that even if the color didn't come out right away, their hair would definitely grow back, so there was nothing to worry about. The boy curiously asked Eugenia where she was headed, and she just explained she was going to make some money. She couldn't reveal the truth about the fake ring, so she tactfully told the gentleman that more money is always a good thing. Crossing his arms over his skinny chest, Joshua replied importantly that he already knew that perfectly well. Selmia suddenly leaped towards the heroine, all excited, asking if she could tag along, saying she was bored out of her skull. Her overprotective brother used to forbid her from even cracking open a window. The main character earnestly promised the girl that she'd work extra hard today to make sure she got her favorite candy. Selmia promised her new big sis that she'd wait patiently. Evgenia gently stroked the little girl's soft hair and, with a tender smile, called her clever little darling. Even though the heroine promised to hustle and be back soon, she was already running on fumes. Thinking about bribes, medicine for the kids, food and rent, Evgenia realized she was practically broke. That's why, driven by sheer desperation, Evgenia headed straight to the job board to find any kind of work she could get. The innkeeper waved his hand dismissively, pointing Evgenia towards a rickety old board covered in postings. The main character strode purposefully to the board and started carefully examining each of the available jobs. There were tons of jobs, all kinds, but unfortunately, most were way beyond what Eugenia could handle or what the conditions allowed. Plus, Eugenia realized with a jolt that the room had gone dead silent, and she could feel every eye on her. The young woman tensed up and quickly pulled her hood over her head. The room buzzed back to life with the sound of voices, and Eugenia instantly felt a wave of relief. She frantically started searching for a decent gig, but nothing paid more than 5 measly gold coins. Suddenly, Eugenia's attention was drawn like a moth to a flame to an old, beat-up notice hanging in the corner. The client was looking for a maid to travel with them to the Ace Empire, promising a hefty reward based on distance, with room for negotiation. This was exactly what Eugenia needed. She showed the innkeeper the notice and stated firmly that she wanted the job. The bearded man raised his eyebrows in surprise, shocked that such a fragile girl would dare to take on such a serious task. Since no one had applied for a whole month, the guy was thinking of taking the ad down. But luckily, Miss showed up just in time. The innkeeper said nobody's been hired for this job yet. The guy told me he tried like hell to figure out why they weren't hiring anyone, but he got nothing. Since she was flat out of options, our girl was totally locked and loaded. After getting to the place, Eugenia told the woman she was looking to meet with Mr. Elvery, and the woman asked her to follow. On the way, the housekeeper kindly said that if she actually got hired, she'd be genuinely thrilled for her. The woman led Eugenia to the right room and warned her it might get pretty loud, so she might want to cover her ears. And then she suddenly started banging on the door and yelling her head off, demanding that Mr. Elvery open up. Soon, a sleepy guy in glasses appeared in the doorway, rubbed his eyes, and asked what was going on. As soon as this guy, Elvery, found out that she was there about the ad, he immediately smiled real friendly and introduced himself. The main character introduced herself back, but it struck her that her employer was way younger than she'd pictured. Elvery gestured towards the door, suggesting they head into the room first. Eugenia agreed, but the moment she stepped inside, she couldn't hide her genuine surprise and slight shock at what she saw. The place was a complete pigsty. The employer apologized to the lady for the mess, clearly embarrassed. He started looking for the best place to sit, and finally said that she could make herself comfortable anywhere she liked. Then the interview began. First, Elvery, in a serious tone, asked if she was absolutely sure what kind of job she was applying for. The main character, holding her own, replied that they needed a maid to accompany them to the Ace Empire. The hero confirmed the information and added that, no matter how close the country was, they would have to cross the border. But that wasn't a problem for Eugenia, which surprised the man, since people usually avoid assignments with long distances. The girl told Elvery not to worry, since she originally had a job lined up in the Ace Empire anyway. The man, frowning slightly, learned that this would be her first trip to that remote place. The main character proudly declared she had plenty of experience serving a master, so she wouldn't lose to anyone in that department. A serious determination blazed in Eugenia's eyes. She was ready to show off her unique skills from modern Korean society. Elvery, with a radiant smile, unexpectedly announced he was hiring her. The main character hadn't expected the whole hiring process to go so smoothly. The guy explained they'd be leaving soon, and since there were no other candidates, he was in a tight spot. Eugenia asked if she could bring her younger brother and sister, since they didn't have any other guardian. Elvery thought for a moment, then gave an unexpected answer. That wasn't a decision he could make on his own. The main character gave her employer a skeptical look. The hero said that she could meet with the master right now and explain her request. Then Eugenia realized that he wasn't the employer. As she climbed the creaking stairs, the girl asked if there was anything she should keep in mind. Elvery said I shouldn't pry into the boss's personal life or bother him. This whole thing is weird. The interview was too easy. They didn't ask much about me, and they've been trying to fill this position forever. Elvery knocked, and without waiting for an answer, shoved her into the room, catching her completely off guard. The main character gave a goofy smile and quickly apologized for being so clumsy. It was so dark inside, she couldn't see a thing, not even shadows. The curtains were completely shut. You couldn't make anything out. Looks like the employer is a creature of the night. Suddenly, a deep male voice told her there was a chair in front of her and she could sit down. The main character did as she was told, then introduced herself, saying she was there for the maid position. The guy, shrouded in darkness, didn't say anything, so, getting a little bolder, she asked what she should call him. The actual employer finally answered, saying his name was Enric. The main character, with a glimmer of hope, asked if she could bring her younger twin siblings on the trip. Henrik lit a candle, as the lady promised she'd take even the lowest pay, just so the master would allow it. The room instantly filled with a soft glow, and Eugenia could clearly make out the strong, masculine silhouette of a dark-haired man. The words caught in her throat. The main character couldn't tear her gaze away from this unbelievably handsome guy. Meanwhile, Henrik slowly pulled on his gloves. But even this ordinary gesture seemed incredibly appealing to Eugenia. If she had a face like that, Eugenia was sure her mood would improve every time she looked in the mirror. But the girl couldn't understand why Henrik, without saying a word, was getting closer and closer to her. Stopping right in front of her, the man thoughtfully said that her face seemed very familiar, as if they had met before. Eugenia covered her mouth with her hands, looking at the hero with admiration, thinking it must be a smooth pickup line. But, considering Henrik's cold and wary gaze, the girl's bold theory turned out to be wrong. With a defeated voice, the main character said no, and the guy immediately asked why her face seemed so familiar. Henrik was totally sure he'd seen her somewhere before. Remembering, the man said with ice-cold calm, that she was that person who's been causing trouble with the kids. The main character was outraged that Mr. Henrik would suddenly accuse her of such a horrible thing. But the hero didn't get how the girl could be so clueless, since she was wanted. Her picture plastered everywhere. Evgenia tried to explain that she'd never done anything like that, but Henrik wouldn't judge whether the accusations were true. However, she was denied the job, especially since it was such an important one. If this handsome dude was telling the truth, the main character had no idea what she was supposed to do now. Henrik noticed the girl's delicate hands, clenching into tight fists from helplessness and anger. Evgenia spun around and said she totally understood Mr. Henrik's position, so she'd be leaving right away. But before leaving, the girl steeled herself, deciding to ask just one crucial question. Would he report her visit? She reminded him about her little brother and sister. The girl begged for just a little time, knowing full well she'd have to protect Joshua and Selmia. Suddenly, Henrik announced he wouldn't be going to the authorities. He flat out refused to get mixed up in other people's messy, complicated business. Instead, Eugenia had to do him a solid. The hottie was hoping she wouldn't rat this place out. "Got it," Eugenia replied curtly, then hurried out of the mysterious room. It seemed like this guy was scared of something too. Luckily, he wouldn't turn her in, so Eugenia decided to get out of there fast. As she went down the stairs, she ran into Mr. Elvery and told him their partnership was off the table. The guy was stunned. His face showed total surprise at the missus' refusal. "This sucks so bad," the guy groaned, and Evgenia figured he was more bummed about it than she was. Evgenia said goodbye to the man, wishing him, as usual, a good and peaceful day. Elvery decided he'd had enough of this crap, so he stormed right into his boss's chambers. He angrily declared that right now, of all times, was no time for these kinds of rejections. Elvery was really hoping to understand the reasons, and Henrik calmly explained that this young woman was already wanted by the authorities. The aide visibly flinched, shocked by such an unexpected answer. Elvery refused to believe it was true. The miss mentioned a brother and sister herself. Could these be the same innocent kids she callously snatched? But the obvious thing was, they couldn't associate with someone accused of such a serious crime. Still, it stung. They should have gotten out of Halant faster, but all the city borders were sealed tight. The reason they shut the borders was because the deposed Duke's soldiers were still out there, without any protection. Because of that, border security got way tighter and more thorough than ever before. Plus, all the local business owners were trying to bail ASAP, trying to save their assets. In a situation this messed up, two foreigners teaming up was bound to raise some serious red flags with the authorities. They're too short-handed to handle all the work, so they decided to look for one more person. There's a huge bounty on this girl. The poster even made it out to this remote backwater village. Elvery figures this girl's not just running from some random dude, but someone with a ton of power. She's gonna cause way more trouble than she's worth, and Enrik doesn't have the time to deal with it. The dark-haired guy jumped when his assistant slammed an official document on his desk, requesting that he hire Miss Eugenia and sign off on it. Enrik snapped, "Were you even listening to a word I said?" But Elvery pointed out, since she's wanted, she's going to be super careful about what she says and does. He reminded Enrik that he's always been a total badass, never once failing with his clever plans, so they could totally use each other to their advantage. Letting out a heavy sigh, the dark-haired guy said he shouldn't have even given Elvery the chance to say those words. He couldn't deny it. If he stalled any longer, things would just get worse, way worse. Finally, Enrik caved, agreed, and immediately announced they were going after her, pronto. Elvery happily hopped down, while the dark-haired guy wondered if he should rethink his decision. Soon after, the main girl accidentally stumbled upon a wanted poster of herself. That handsome dude was spitting straight facts. She's now the most wanted criminal in the whole area. But luckily, nobody in this tiny village knows anything about her. The ad didn't mention Joshua or Selmia, which she found super weird and out of place. You'd think they'd mention the kids in a case like this, but they're only looking for Evgenia, which is seriously messed up. Whatever the real reason, first things first. She had to hide those twins somewhere safe. After ditching that sketchy flyer, the main character felt a little bit of relief, which she desperately needed. As she was about to bounce, she overheard some people talking about a wanted poster for the Crown Duke's heir. These posters, plastered everywhere, promised a fortune to whoever took out the kidnapper and brought back her head. The reward was insane, like seriously huge, 1,000,000 shiny gold coins. Evgenia bolted out into the pouring rain. Things were getting hairy. She needed to get out of town, ASAP. Suddenly, she remembered Selmia's promise about candy, but wandering around this dangerous area was just plain crazy. A brutal tug-of-war started raging in her troubled mind. She gave in and ran off to find a candy store, completely unaware that unseen shadows were already tailing her. 2 hulking guys walked into the tavern, announcing right away they were looking for someone. Elvry threw back his hood, and the innkeeper recognized him instantly. He explained briefly that they needed the name of the mysterious blonde who'd been here this morning. Turns out this miss, unfortunately, isn't registered here. Her name isn't in the book. Elvry angrily accused the guy of stalling, until the innkeeper blurted out she was just here. The men stopped arguing immediately and stared at the owner of the place with intense interest. The innkeeper clarified that she'd only left about 10 minutes ago. The main character whirled around when she heard quick footsteps coming right for her. The men quickly took her down, convinced they'd caught the wanted criminal from the reward poster. This delicate beauty didn't exactly scream kidnapper, but 1,000,000 in gold doesn't leave you much choice. Price is the price. Evgenia came to just as the lowlifes were arguing like crazy about how to split the promised reward. Her fingers brushed against a small but solid pouch. Spotting the movement, the guy grabbed her arm, telling her to quit pretending to be weak and helpless. Suddenly, he let go, screaming his head off, clutching at his eyes, and our girl took the chance to bolt. His buddy yelled at Evgenia that if he caught her, she was a dead woman. She thought she'd be safe once she got out of the alley, but then she ran smack into a tall figure. For a split second, she was totally clueless about what just happened. Fear froze her solid. Standing right in front of her was a towering figure in a cloak, with piercing blue eyes. Evgenia's eyes were wide with raw animal terror. She bolted like a shot, ignoring the guy in the dark cloak yelling at her to stop. The second he grabbed her wrist, she freaked and started screaming, begging him to let go. Eugenia was stunned when his hood fell back, and she recognized Enrico's familiar face. She was pissed. The hottie promised not to rat her out. But then her relentless pursuers jumped out from around the corner. Spotting her with him, they immediately yelled that they'd called dibs on such a valuable prize. If the dark-haired dude grabbed her, they'd pay him off, because Eugenia is a tricky catch you can't let slip away. She was taken aback when Enrico suddenly told her to duck her head, warning her things were about to get real dangerous. Then, firmly but gently, he pulled the scared blonde close against his broad chest. Eugenia froze, her heart pounding, when she saw a gun in his hand. The guys just laughed, all cocky, thinking the dark-haired dude was just pulling some kind of lame stunt. They had absolutely no idea how determined Enric really was. So when he shot one of the guys chasing them right in the arm, they stopped laughing real fast. The dude with the scar on his face just screamed, totally freaked out by the agonizing pain. Both of those guys went down, passed out cold from sheer terror, and finally, the street went silent. Enric looked over at Eugenia, asking if she was okay, and she said in a shaky voice that she was fine. She was wondering why this guy was so desperate to find her, that he'd even bring a loaded gun. And even a silencer, Eugenia whispered, completely stunned. Enric raised an eyebrow, surprised she even knew what a silencer was. Eugenia explained that it reduces the sound of the gunshot, and he realized she knew a lot about weapons. But noble ladies usually aren't into that kind of thing. She responded that she wasn't from noble blood at all. Enric couldn't tell if she was playing dumb or if she genuinely had no clue. Only a handful of people knew about the new weapon, but a regular maid knew about a pistol developed just recently. That was messed up. Evgenia started thanking her savior, but Enric cut her off, saying he came to hire her. He decided to explain the details on the way, so he told her to stick close and follow him. Thinking it over again, Enric realized there was no guarantee this move wouldn't cause even more trouble. Elvery wouldn't let up, and considering Evgenia's situation, this decision seemed like the best and most fitting. This hotshot wanted to use her, but she didn't have a choice, because a better opportunity might never come along. So, with a heavy heart, Evgenia agreed to do exactly as he said. She froze when he looked like he was about to add something, but then he immediately started wavering, losing his nerve. Unexpectedly, Enric turned around, dropped to one knee, and humbly asked her to be his wife. Eugenia took it all super seriously and immediately started explaining that they'd just met. Plus, she has 2 young kids. Henrik asked her to hear him out and explained that things aren't looking good right now, since a lot of people aren't crossing the border much anymore. The main character, with a sinking feeling, guessed that soon all roads out of the country might be shut down. So, for the time being, the safest bet was to pretend to be a family, so as not to arouse suspicion. During the inspection, they'd need to play the part of a married couple, and the heroes decided to meet up later. Today, Eugenia almost got taken out because she was flagged as a person of interest. It sounded so crazy when he asked if the kids she was with were, taken, but luckily the guy bought it. With a shaky hand, Eugenia reached for the doorknob, but then she clutched it to her chest, trying to calm down so she wouldn't be trembling in front of the kids. Steeling herself, the girl walked into the room and asked the twins with a big smile if they'd been waiting for her. Selmia bounced over to the girl, grinning ear to ear when she saw the promised candy. The main character apologized, 'cause the sweets got a little damp, but the little girl just smiled and said it was totally fine. The girls noticed scratches on their sister's hands, and Evgenia explained she just took a tumble on the way. Joshua immediately started checking out the main character's hands, asking, all worried, how it happened. Evgenia apologized to the twins for bothering them. Then, her voice soft, she told Selmia to dig into the candy to cheer herself up. Out of nowhere, Joshua, frowning a little, asked Evgenia if she worked with that tall guy. The main character realized the young master must have spotted her employer through the window. But as soon as Joshua heard Evgenia wasn't sure who she was working for, he started chewing her out for being so careless. Selmia, not waiting for the argument to end, told her brother that her sister was doing way better than him since he had 0 social skills. Trying not to laugh, Evgenia playfully told them to lay off Josh, and the kid immediately piped up that he was just worried about her. The main character figured she needed to stop teasing the young master, or he was going to get really pouty. Evgenia knelt down next to Joshua and, looking him in the eye, promised she'd do whatever it took to keep their promise. Even if he's playing grown-up, no matter how you slice it, he's still a kid. Now, the main character decided to explain the job to the twins. Since the borders might be closing soon, they need to get out of the duchy ASAP. First, they need to head to the hotel where their employer's staying, like, right now. The kids started getting ready, and Evgenia remembered there was something important she wanted to say. And then, with excitement in her voice, she happily blurted out that she got hitched. "What did you say?" Joshua asked, totally thrown, and Selmia excitedly repeated the main character's words. The kid froze, like a statue carved out of marble, and the bag of candy slipped right out of his hands. "You just said husband?" Joshua exploded. Selmia immediately started congratulating her sister, her eyes sparkling with joy, asking if her future husband was hot. But Joshua wouldn't let it go. He couldn't understand how Eugenia could find a husband when she went looking for a job. The main character, trying to stay calm, explained that due to certain circumstances, she'd have a husband for a little while. But it was just an act. They have to pretend to be married for a few days. It's part of the deal with the employer, which will make their escape safer and easier. Even though they have to play house, at least they can ditch this dukedom without any trouble. Eugenia was worried about the twins' identities being exposed, so they needed to be extra careful. "Let's just hang in there a little longer," the girl said, and her gentle hug enveloped the twins, warming them. After a while, there was a knock at the door, and Eugenia calmly said she'd get it, since it was probably the employer. The theory checked out. Elvery and Enric were standing right there. The dark-haired one asked if she was ready, his eyes immediately dropping down. The main character was stunned to see the twins right beside her. Enric mused that black hair would definitely work. Elvery explained he was worried about what to do if the guys looked too different, because it could screw up the whole plan. If you look closely, meeting Evgenia's little brother gives off the same vibes as Enric. People will believe he's his kid. Joshua told her the marriage would be fake, but she never said anything about him being someone's son. He was pissed. Enric didn't care if the kid wanted to be his fake son or not. He just wanted everything to go smoothly. Looking away, Joshua said he could play the son. But why did the father have to be that dark-haired guy? The kid pointed at Elvery and exclaimed with childish innocence that this unsure-looking dude could be it too. Henrik said thoughtfully that the kid wasn't as patient as he'd thought. Then he added it was only for a few days, just a show for the others. When Henrik sees someone getting in the way, saying they can't handle something, he starts to wonder if he has the patience for it. Those words hit the kid hard, and he immediately shouted that there wasn't anything he couldn't handle. Joshua asked the dark-haired guy to wait and see how perfectly he'd play the role of his son, showing off his confidence. The main character was surprised at how smoothly Henrik handled Joshua. Even though they were a little late, now was the perfect time to introduce themselves, since they'd be spending some time together. Sally stepped forward, gave a graceful curtsy, said her name, and asked them to take care of her. Her movements were full of elegance. Eugenia wanted to introduce Joshua, but the boy declared that the men didn't need to know. The main character knew the boy hated being called by his nickname, but right now, he wasn't showing any manners at all. Since Joshua refused to be his son, Eugenia sadly announced she'd be going alone then. Hearing that, the kid immediately bowed and introduced himself to the gentleman, calling himself Shushu. The men bowed back, and Elvery said with a smile that it was a very sweet name. Then he offered to carry the Mrs. luggage, but Eugenia quickly replied that it was all right. She couldn't trouble him with such chores. Arms crossed, Joshua, acting like a little grown-up, told Eugenia to hand over the suitcases instead of trying to drag two at once. Enric also had his code of honor, so he gallantly took the heroine's carry-on, freeing up her hands. Eugenia tried to object, since Enric didn't have to do that, but his resolve was unshakable. But Joshua cut her off, asking if he could hold her hand now that she wasn't carrying anything. Selmy ran up from the other side, and, with childlike spontaneity, asked if she could hold her hand too. Soon the heroes arrived at their destination. Selly was excited about her new room, and Joshua said skeptically that it was nothing special. Henrik asked the miss to come up to his room after she'd unpacked. Once they were alone, Elvery said he doubted Eugenia kidnapped those kids, and the brunette agreed. The guy suggested they drop it, and the assistant agreed, happy they'd be leaving this god-forsaken Halant soon. "We need to make it snappy," Henrik replied to his friend. Soon, the main character knocked on the door, and a smiling Elvery appeared on the threshold. Eugenia apologized, explaining the kids wanted to come with her, so they all came together. Joshua stated in a serious tone that they were competent enough to be at this meeting. Elvery said it was no problem, and with a charming smile, invited everyone inside. Everyone's roles are simple. Henrik and Eugenia are husband and wife. The twins are their kids, and we've decided Elvery is both the chamberlain and the coachman. Just in case, the brunette suggested changing the kids' names to throw off anyone who might be tailing them. Selmia raised her hand and asked to be called Selly, and Joshua, after thinking about it, asked to be called just Shu. Enric gave the names his approval with a nod. Elvery suggested Miss Eugenia come up with a name for herself, or choose one she usually goes by. The main character suggested the name Zhenya, but it was too close to her real one, so Enric asked her to change it. The young woman thought for a moment and suggested the name Hari, and the man agreed with approval. He stood in front of her, called her by her new name, and extending his hand, asked her to take care of him. Maybe it was because it was so long ago, but the girl felt awkward now that the old name had been said again. She reached out her hand in response, and likewise asked Enric to take care of her. Enric decided to clarify with Miss Hari if it was a nickname, but the girl said no, but she'd be able to respond to it quickly. It was the name she'd been called throughout her whole previous life. "Hari!" the guy called out, and she responded right away. "Looks like we're good to go." Since they've got everything sorted, Elvery said he'd get their IDs made up. Evgenia leaned down to the kids and explained they absolutely had to call her Mom. Selmia threw her hands up, stoked, and shouted she'd do her best. Joshua gave a more reserved promise too. Suddenly, someone started pounding on the door, and it sent a shiver of fear right through our girl. Could this person be here for her? The guys looked at each other and nodded, understanding each other without a word. "Who is it?" Elvery asked, walking to the door. He heard a woman's voice on the other side. He opened the door and saw the landlady. She hadn't found him on the second floor, so she'd come up to the third, even though he'd asked her not to. The woman explained that a bit of a situation had come up, so she just couldn't help herself. Turns out she burned her hand, so she can't make dinner, but she's offered us the use of her kitchen. The main character felt a wave of relief, realizing she'd been stressing out for nothing. Elvery told the hostess he couldn't cook, but Eugenia jumped right in and said she'd handle it then. And then she asked the kids what they wanted for a snack. Sally started rattling off a whole list, but her brother immediately shut her up and told her to pick the one thing she wanted most. So the little one chose pancakes with tons of whipped cream. The main character promised to make them and just asked them to hang tight. But after a while, Eugenia just couldn't wrap her head around what was going on. Why did Enric volunteer to help and even put on a pink apron with a teddy bear on it? It raised so many questions. The guy noticed Eugenia staring and called her out on it, and she immediately got flustered, saying she was just lost in thought. Miss tried to tell Enric that he really didn't have to help. The dude, like a total pro chef, chopped the veggies and said they'd get it done way faster together. This guy was seriously exceeding all of the main character's expectations. Once everything was ready, the girl called the kids to the table. In that short time, they managed to whip up some high-class dishes that now decorated the table. Sally was stoked, but Enric told her to take it easy, or she'd get a tummy ache. Suddenly snapping to it, Joshua decided to ask the guy a question. He knew things had been kinda crazy lately, but the kid didn't get why Enric was so sure the borders were closing. Joshua turned to Eugenia and asked if she knew anything. Turns out, right after the previous duke croaked last year, the Duchy of Holland split into two factions. Benjamin, the previous ruler's bastard son, impersonated the heir, Shigel, to steal the throne. Word is, after seizing power, he became the duke's lackey. Things will only get worse until the hero's caught. Right about then, a couple of marquises, not aligned with any faction, went missing. A smart guy like Joshua can easily connect the dots. Enric explained that there's been a surge in criminal activity lately, which is why they need IDs. But even with that, two grown men are gonna raise suspicion, so they figured they'd create the image of a wholesome family. To be with his father during his final hours, he and his wife, Hari, returned to the duchy. Annoyed, Joshua immediately corrected Enric, pointing out that the wife is a fake. The dark-haired guy explained that it'll be enough to explain why Ace's people are in the duchy and trying to cross the border. The kid was taken aback when Enric suddenly shoved a ton of meat at him and told him to eat up. The man explained it'd help him grow big and strong, but Joshua, like a wildcat, snapped that he could handle himself. Elvery said getting Miss Eugenia's ID whipped up should take a week, tops. Also, they're meeting with some merchants to set up a fitting right after noon tomorrow. Gotta get her travel wardrobe sorted. Because looking like that, Eugenia ain't gonna pass for a noble. Since she's playing Enrico's wife, we need high-end fabrics, something that screams old money, so nobody questions her. Matching jewelry's the last thing, and the trickiest. Gotta be careful looking around, what with the kids and all. Matching jewelry's a big deal, like a wedding ring. It's a must-have for weddings on this continent. So Eugenia's gotta wear some seriously expensive bling, but getting that kind of stuff fast is a pain. She knew that, so she told the guys she could handle the matching jewelry. Said she got some from her late parents. The guys asked to see him, and Eugenia said they'd have to wait a bit. Joshua jumped when Eugenia suddenly knocked on the door. Once inside, the main character announced she had a favor to ask. Eugenia felt awkward, but she steeled herself and asked Joshua to borrow his brooch and pendant. They needed it so she and Enrique could pretend to be a married couple. The boy's eyes widened as the young woman started apologizing for even asking such a thing. The kid immediately said it was no big deal and handed the main character his late parents' jewelry. Eugenia hugged the boy tightly and promised she'd take good care of them and return them soon. Caught off guard, Joshua quickly pulled away and wished the heroine a good trip tomorrow. The next day, Eric and Eugenia set off for the city. The consultant happily greeted the esteemed guests and said they'd been expecting them. Precious fabrics, specially imported from overseas, had been prepared just for our heroes. The sales guy just didn't get why people were shopping for morning clothes. The main girl just burst into tears, and Enrico looked totally freaked out. The guy immediately snapped, saying the sales guy was being way too casual with customers. Evgenia quietly explained that her father had recently passed, so she was still grieving. The sales guy was panicking because she started crying again. Enrico grabbed the main girl's hand and dramatically declared he'd always be there for her, and she thanked him for his support. The sales guy started apologizing for his terrible blunder. Evgenia said it was no big deal. She just wanted to look at the outfits, and the store employees immediately went into overdrive. Soon they were showing her top-of-the-line fabrics that she was sure to love. First, they needed to take her measurements, so they asked the main girl to stand up. But Evgenia totally wasn't expecting this. Under her cloak, she's wearing old clothes. Definitely not the kind a noble lady would wear, and it could raise some eyebrows. Henrik jumped right in and told them to skip the measurements, saying there was no need to measure his wife. The sales guy explained that a ready-made outfit might not fit right, but the dark-haired dude explained that his wife was expecting their third child. Totally clueless, our girl just went along with it and confirmed the info. But as soon as it hit her, she shot Henrik a look of total shock. Out of nowhere, the guy gives a soft smile and says the kid's definitely gonna look like her and be just as cute. Our girl blushed like crazy, and the sales guy just thought to himself, "Man, making a buck is tough." He asked the couple to hang tight while he got the outfit wrapped up. As soon as they were alone, our main girl turned to Henrik. She jumped up, totally stunned, and blurted out that they never even talked about a third kid. The guy stood up and said he was surprised she cried too, but that she handled it like a pro. Taking Evgenia's hand, Henrik gave her props and told her to keep up the good work. The main girl blushed and promised she'd do her best. As soon as our heroes got back, Elvry dropped a bomb. "They've got a problem." He wrapped up the IDs faster than he thought, but couldn't get the marriage certificate. Things are such a mess that even the master wants to bail on Halant, so he asked to tag along. Henrik thought for a sec and said that in that case, they'd be laying down some conditions too. First, they split the second they're through the gates, and second, Henrik sets the date. If the master doesn't agree, no deal. The main girl knocked on the twins' door and went inside to tell them they're leaving tomorrow afternoon. The kids perked right up, and Joshua asked if they'd ditch those dudes as soon as they got through the gates. But Evgenia said no, since that might look suspicious. They'll split up after they get to the Ace Empire. The carriage ride's gonna take about a day, so the main character told the kids to change into their pajamas and hit the hay. A little later, Selly changed into her bunny pajamas and immediately asked her big sis if the outfit looked good on her. Joshua, in his cat pajamas, was bummed because they looked way too childish. The main character laughed and told the kids to get to sleep already, because she was turning out the lights. Joshua and Selmy laid down on either side of Evgenia and were out like a light as soon as she wished them sweet dreams. But the main character herself couldn't fall asleep. She sat up in bed as soon as she realized it was a lost cause. The main character was seriously doubting whether she could pull off her act tomorrow, and that's why she couldn't sleep. Still, Evgenia was sure that no matter what happened, she'd protect the twins from any danger. The young woman pulled out a brooch and gazed at the gemstone, which shimmered beautifully in the moonlight. Then, she suddenly felt the urge to step out onto the balcony. As soon as she did, the cool, fresh air enveloped her whole body. But then, Evgenia spotted someone, and a look of confusion immediately crossed her face. It was Henrik training down below. Guess he couldn't sleep either, even though he always looks exhausted. They have to leave tomorrow, so Evgenia wondered if he'd be all right. Seeing the girl, Henrik asked why she wasn't asleep so late. Evgenia jumped a little and explained she just wanted some air. The man smiled warmly and told her to go get some sleep, wishing her good night. And then he asked her not to be late tomorrow. Evgenia laughed at that, but back in her room, she felt ashamed, like she'd gotten away with something she shouldn't have. The next day, our girl changed into morning clothes and asked the twins if they were ready to go. Selly excitedly told her mom she was good to go, but Joshua just wanted to get this over with. Elvry, like a true gentleman, offered young Miss Selly his hand and helped her into the carriage. Joshua snapped out of staring at the horse when Elvry called out his name. Just then, a guy in a cloak approached our heroes. Enrik turned to his wife and told her this man would be escorting them. Our main girl nodded and asked him to look after her. Enrik said that he and Elvry would ride alongside the carriage, so she could just open the window if anything came up. Then, the dark-haired dude helped his wife into the carriage. Finally, after all this time, the carriage made it to the spot. Our girl looked determined, but deep down, she was still feeling anxious and uneasy. But hey, If they can just get past these knights at the gate, they can get to the Ace Empire. The knights shouted out that nobody was leaving these lands right now, ordering the carriage to turn around immediately. Enric calmly explained that they were nobles from the Ace Empire and needed to return home. The dark-haired guy mentioned that rumor had it the Ace Imperial family always took extra special care of their people. The captain of the guard stepped forward and asked the heroes to present their IDs first. Baron Enric Tryson, with a flourish, immediately handed over his official document for a thorough inspection. The dark-haired guy explained that he'd come to pick up his wife and kids, who were visiting her family's place. The captain dryly announced that he'd be taking a quick peek inside the carriage. Throwing open the door, the knight cut right to the chase, asking the missus what exactly brought them to Halant. The main character calmly explained that she'd received some worrying news about her father being seriously ill, so she came as quickly as possible. When asked point-blank about her maiden name, Eugenia stated the impressive name of Harilaplan. The captain inquired how long she'd been married, and without hesitation, the girl confidently replied, 8 years. Looks like Baron Enric wrapped up his chat with the guards at the gate pretty quick and easy. The persistent captain of the guard seemed to have one last request to make. Out of the blue, he asked the missus to remove her head covering so he could get a good look at her face. Eugenia wondered if this guy was really blowing off etiquette and being totally insensitive to someone in mourning. The heroine was thrown for a loop, not knowing what to do. She was genuinely scared she was about to be exposed. The guard is hunting the heir to the duchy, so why does the captain want to verify her appearance? She's just a girl. Does he already know she's been wanted all over Halant for ages? You okay, Mom? The kids asked, worried when they saw Evgenia suddenly get all flustered. The main character snapped out of it, realizing she needed to get a grip, like, now. She told the kids she was fine, explaining she just wanted to look her best for them. The captain visibly jumped when the missus called him out by name. All of a sudden, sharp and bossy. The main character coldly asked if the guy was ready to take full responsibility for what happened if she took off her hat. Even seeing the ID, he showed no respect, and she was struggling to keep it together for the kids. Out of nowhere, the Baroness demanded they immediately fetch someone way higher up the food chain than this captain. The aristocrat was about to report the guard's rudeness and even take off her hat, just like he was so cocky about. Above the captain are the head of security and the landowner, so they could be in for more than just a slap on the wrist. The guards were all over her, begging her to stop, bowing, saying the inspection was done, and apologizing like crazy. The main character ordered the driver to get moving, now. As soon as that carriage door slammed shut, Evgenia felt a huge weight lift off her shoulders. Thank God that's over. The kids were already saying that dude gave them the creeps big time. Finally, the guard barked out the all clear, yelling for them to swing open those massive gates. The plan worked. They're actually getting out of here, leaving Halant in the dust. After a while, Enric expertly reined in his horse. He walked right up to the craftsman and told him their deal was done, finished. Seeing the guy start to get all shifty and hesitant, Enric fixed him with a stare and asked what the problem was. Suddenly, the driver yanked the reins hard, and the horses bolted forward like a shot. Inside the fancy carriage, a sudden jolt sent everything into chaos. The main character yanked her trembling kids close, asking if they were okay. Eugenia had no clue what the heck was going on outside. No sign of Enric or Elvery. Could this be some dirty trick by that sneaky driver? The main character knew she had to protect the kids at all costs. She needed a way out, fast. So, Eugenia started racking her brain, desperately searching for any kind of solution. At that super dangerous moment, Enric and Elvery were riding like the wind, trying to catch up to the carriage. The dark-haired dude quickly pulled out a hidden pistol, his hand aiming, searching for the right target. His eyes went wide as soon as he saw the blonde girl risking her life. Eugenia, totally desperate, scrambled out and was hanging on to the roof of the carriage for dear life. "Get back in here now!" Henrik roared, demanding Evgenia climb back inside and fast. Just then, the sneaky driver saw the girl risking it all, hanging outside the carriage. So he floored it, trying to stop the brave beauty from escaping. Henrik yelled Evgenia's name, seeing she was barely holding on with one hand. Our girl sucked it up, and with her last bit of strength, grabbed the slick roof with her other hand. The dark-haired dude shouted it was crazy dangerous, and she needed to get back inside, pronto. He ordered Evgenia to get back in the carriage and protect the little kids. The main character took a deep breath, but she listened to Henrik. Once the blonde was back inside, the dark-haired guy told Elvry to back off a little. Then, without a second thought, he aimed for the sweet spot and fired. With incredible precision, the guy nailed the wooden wheel, blew a hole right through it. It instantly splintered in two with a deafening crack and went flying. The carriage screeched to a halt, and Henrik immediately peered inside to make sure everyone was okay. The main girl forced a smile and said she was fine, but asked him to get the scared kids out first. Henrik immediately ordered Elvry to carefully lead the frightened children out of the carriage, and then he extended his strong hand to Eugenia to help her out. "Hang on a sec with Elvry," the man requested. Once he was sure Eugenia was all right, Henrik headed straight for the coachman to figure things out. "Crap," the dark-haired guy muttered. "The coachman's dead. They even got to him. But how the heck did this information leak?" Suddenly, the main character shouted out Sally's name, all worried. Henrik came over to see what was up, and Eugenia exclaimed that Sally had passed out. The main character started shaking the girl, but to her horror, Sally started weakening right before their eyes. They needed to do something, and fast, or things were going to get seriously messed up. Eugenia carefully handed the unconscious Sally over to Mr. Elvry, begging him to watch over the little one. The main character frantically looked around, desperately searching for something that could help them right now. Her gaze suddenly landed on a familiar plant, whose fruit could be their salvation. Eugenia hurried back to the little girl, gently leaned in, and quietly asked her to open her mouth. Sally obeyed, and the main character squeezed a few life-saving drops of the fruit she'd picked into her mouth. Joshua, totally lost, asked in confusion what the heck she just gave his sister. The little one flashed a smile and whispered that it was super yummy. Joshua, hiding what he really felt, clenched his little hands into fists. And then, holding back tears, he yelled in frustration that his sister was a total bonehead. The little dude just couldn't bring himself to admit how freaked out he was. Selmia gently stroked her brother's cheek and said with a warm smile that everything was okay now. Enric asked if Celie was all right, and she said yes, that the girl was probably just in shock. But her fever should break soon, now that she's eaten that special miracle fruit. Still, the main character cautiously said that she'd better look for more of those healing fruits, just in case. Suddenly, Enric strode up to her, all business, and said he needed to talk to her, like now. "What in the world were you thinking, jumping out of a moving carriage?" the guy demanded, annoyed. "Seriously? She's got nothing to say for pulling a stunt like that?" Eugenia explained she couldn't let them get caught, so she decided to jump the coachman and take the reins herself. But Henrik was still scratching his head, wondering how someone so delicate thought she could actually pull that off. The main character pulled a little pouch of powder out of her pocket, the same stuff she used for self-defense before. But the dark-haired guy asked why she couldn't just wait for him. Couldn't she trust him at all? Looking down, Eugenia quietly replied that she'd already accomplished her main goal, getting them out of danger. They escaped the duchy, just like they planned, and she figured he just didn't need her anymore. Henrik came to the unpleasant conclusion that in her eyes, he was some kind of lowlife. Eugenia immediately blurted out that it wasn't like that at all. The man reminded her that according to their agreement, they were leaving Hallant together and heading to the Ace Empire. It's his job now to get the lady back to the Empire safe and sound. If he can't do it, at least she should trust herself. Right away, Eugenia apologized like crazy, saying she never meant to offend him in any way. The main character wasn't so sure. I mean, she was just a nobody, totally unimportant. Because in this story, Eugenia was just a side character, not the main attraction. They could cut her role out at any time to make room for the hero. But when Eugenia, by some twist of fate, took Aileen's place, she faced a serious situation that could have ended badly for her. A desperate idea flashed through her head. Maybe she should make the ultimate sacrifice to protect Joshua and Selmia. Deep down, the main character seemed to think that's just how things were supposed to go. But suddenly, breaking the silence, Enric told Miss Eugenia firmly that she was way more important than she gave herself credit for. The hero insisted that sacrificing herself wasn't the only option. There were always other ways to deal with things. The fact that this young woman is now guardian to two defenseless twins is already a huge deal. All this time, the main character's been obsessed with how she could change the future that's been laid out for her. The funny thing is, it's actually Eugenia, not Aileen, who's the most crucial character in how the story unfolds. So what was she doing all this time, being so damn important? Laughing at herself, The main character realized her mistake, and, truly regretting it, called herself a total idiot. Enric calmly and understandingly replied that she just needed to come to that important realization herself. Out of nowhere, the man gently asked the girl to give him her hand. Turns out, the dark-haired guy noticed her palm was all beat up, so he carefully bandaged it with his handkerchief. Evgenia promised to wash and return the handkerchief, to which the man replied she was free to do whatever she wanted. The main character smiled widely and gratefully, then headed towards the kids with a light heart. As soon as they hoisted Joshua onto the horse, his whole face lit up. You could tell the kid was loving it. Now it was Evgenia's turn to mount the impressive horse, which looked like a freaking mountain to her. She gave it a real shot, trying with all her might to clamber onto the horse's high back. But she couldn't manage it. So Henrik gallantly offered his help, and the young lady didn't refuse. Before carefully placing his hand on her slender waist, the man, ever the gentleman, politely apologized. Then, without much effort, he easily and gracefully lifted the delicate blonde onto the back of the powerful steed. In that fleeting moment, their faces ended up way too close, creating an awkward intimacy. Thinking something she shouldn't, the main character quickly closed her eyes, totally flustered. Joshua looked at Evgenia quizzically and asked with a doubtful tone what she was doing. The girl hurriedly exclaimed that she was just super tired, so they should get going as soon as possible. Joshua started freaking out that Evgenia had a fever, but she told him she was totally fine. After driving a good chunk further, they stopped to camp out under the stars and immediately got a fire going. They'd have to sleep in pretty rough conditions for now, but nobody was complaining. The main girl was seriously glad she'd packed the luggage. 'Cause a sick kid can't sleep on the bare ground. No way! Henrik said he'd stay up on night watch with Elvery, so everyone else could crash. But the main girl doubted she'd fall asleep outside, so she figured she might as well get a head start on tomorrow's stuff. She needed to give Selmy another dose of medicine, and just in case, carefully check on Joshua. The young woman gently touched the brooch. The main girl didn't even realize when she drifted off into a deep sleep. Slowly opening her eyes, Evgenia vaguely realized that someone was quietly singing a lullaby nearby. But those weren't kids, they were sleeping peacefully. So yeah, she probably just dreamt it in her half-sleep. The main character sat up, and Henrik, without looking away from his post, immediately asked if she was awake. This guy still hadn't gone to bed. Turns out Elvery went scouting, so he needs to stay sharp. Eugenia offered to take his place, but Henrik refused, 'cause he was sure he wouldn't be able to sleep anyway. The main character asked, confused, if he was having trouble sleeping. Henrik nodded, confirming her guess, and admitted that this problem had been bugging him for a long time. But that doesn't mean the guy can't sleep at all, so she asked him to hang on a sec. She carefully pulled a small jar of mint oil and a few dried mint leaves out of her luggage. If you drink them as tea, they'll not only relieve fatigue, but also help you kick insomnia's butt. Eugenia handed the hot, fragrant drink to the guy and politely asked him to give it a try. Enric took the drink gratefully, saying the refreshing mint smell was pretty nice. The main girl, looking closely, noticed the dark-haired guy had a killer headache too. She explained that not getting enough sleep often brings on headaches and suggested rubbing some ointment on his temples and neck. The girl added that this miracle ointment is easy to get, so Enric could just keep it. The guy decided to thank the blonde, and looking her in the eye, asked how much she wanted for her help. "It's nothing," Eugenia answered gently. "It's just a friendly gift for someone you share good times and bad with." The main girl immediately started freaking out. Remembering the difference in their positions, she couldn't call them friends. "Friendly?" Enric asked, surprised, with genuine interest and a slight smile. In that case, he was happy to accept the gift and promised Miss Eugenia he'd put it to good use. A really cute, genuine smile appeared on the main girl's face, lit by the campfire. She promised the guy her mint concoction would definitely knock him out. Henrik wondered how a regular maid knew so much. Had she been dabbling in herbalism? In that case, Evgenia would be better off running a pharmacy, he thought, with a hint of irony. The main character explained that she'd craved a bright, fancy city life ever since she was a kid. After her dad died, she had no one to rely on and needed a job, so she came to the city, but she admitted she never actually studied herbalism. Henrik asked, surprised, "So when did she get so good at this stuff?" Evgenia just said he was asking too many questions. The guy smiled and replied, "Doesn't it make sense to chat in a situation like this?" The main character agreed, and after a moment's thought, revealed her late father was a renowned herbalist. Though, sadly, she never actually learned from him. Eugenia wasn't even allowed near the medicinal herbs. Those were her father's strict rules. Still, it's not the kind of skill you can pick up just by watching. So Henrik asked, a little skeptical, when she learned all this. Realizing she wasn't going to answer, the man gave a faint smile and said there wasn't much point in dwelling on it. Come to think of it, it is weird. Eugenia herself didn't understand how she knew certain things about herbalism. No matter how hard she tried to remember the smallest details of her childhood, nothing came to mind. Plus, she has zero memories before a certain age. She'd heard a strange story from her father a long time ago. When she was only 5 years old, little Eugenia suddenly got lost in a thick, impenetrable forest. After 3 agonizing days, she was thankfully found on the highest, most inaccessible point in the forest. The little girl was completely safe, thanks to the wild animals lying nearby, keeping her warm with their body heat. It was a crazy experience, but Eugenia didn't remember a thing. And, if you really think about it, she knew all the names of the herbs from that point on. The main character flinched as the man called out her name again, insistent and sharp. "What's got you so lost in thought?" Henrik asked, and she replied she was thinking about training to be an apothecary. The man thought it was a pretty good idea, since there were so many precious herbs in the vast empire. It sounded super tempting, since she'd be able to create a wider variety of medicines that way. Just like that, dawn broke, and morning arrived. And most importantly, Selmia's condition had improved a lot. The main character also ate some medicinal herbs for her aching muscles. Henrik was also patiently teaching Joshua, who was showing a real interest in horses and riding. At this rate, our heroes would soon find themselves in the majestic, thriving Ace Empire. The atmosphere was totally different from the duchy. Henrik said they were about to go through inspection. The main character was determined to do her best this time too, but the dark-haired guy told her she didn't need to stress so much right now. As soon as the guards asked the heroes to come closer, Elvry told the missus not to sweat it too much. The guard took the blonde's ID and, with a big fake yawn, asked for her husband's ID too. Henrik, without missing a beat, handed over his official document with a flourish. After reading the man's name and title, the knights immediately started apologizing and said it was an honor. The main girl was stunned by all this, and Henrik told her to step on it before things got even crazier. All this time, Eugenia was still totally bewildered, not finding any logical explanation for what was happening. Is it really that easy to get through? Late that evening, Joshua, like a wild animal, flat out refused any help, saying he could clean himself up just fine. Drying Selmia's damp hair, the main girl agreed, and then something suddenly caught her eye. At the very roots of the little one's soft hair, her natural color was starting to show. Eugenia wondered if she should dye it again, but she didn't really want to blow the rest of her cash on more dye. The girl explained to the little girl that her natural hair color had already grown out a little. She'd be able to ditch Enrique soon, so she asked the kid to hang tight for a bit. Elvry, after chugging a mug of energizing ale, was genuinely stoked to be back home and taste the flavor of his hometown. Enrique politely asked Miss Eugenia if she enjoyed it, and she replied that it was really delicious. The main character's attention was drawn to the man's hands. For some reason, he was wearing those fancy leather gloves again today, hiding something. Selmia, sitting next to her, let out a heavy sigh and said she was stuffed to the gills. It was so good. The little one even figured she could happily eat like that all day. Since the kids ate well, Enrique suggested they go first, but Joshua immediately piped up, asking what he meant by that. The guy calmly explained this conversation was for adults only, but the kid point-blank refused to leave. The boy flinched the second Eugenia called him by name, all sweet and suspicious-like. The main girl, trying to soothe things, promised the kids she'd explain later and gently told them to go. Joshua didn't argue anymore, and with a sigh told Sally to follow him and be good. The little one, beaming, wished everyone sweet dreams. Now that the kids were gone, Henrik suggested Miss Eugenia get started. They all put in a ton of work, so the guy figured it was time to call it quits right then and there. Eugenia knew they'd have to part ways eventually, but she didn't think it would be today. For some reason, she suddenly felt this heavy, crushing sadness she couldn't explain, squeezing her heart. They'd been through so much together, and the girl added that they only made it this far thanks to the guys. But Eugenia decided to ask one important question. Was her wanted poster valid in the Empire? Henrik replied that the Empire doesn't get wanted lists from the Duchy, so she didn't have to worry. The dark-haired guy also wanted Eugenia to return her ID, since they were good at spotting fakes. While Henrik whispered something quietly to Elvry, the main character reached for her inside pocket. Then she handed over the document, and the man in return put a hefty sack on the table. Inside was the promised reward, and the main character was floored by the incredibly huge amount. Her face immediately broke into a wide, genuine, and indescribably joyful smile, and she thanked the man. Elvry still had things he needed to prepare, so he decided to take his leave first. Henrik took a pendant off his neck and held it out to the main character. He'd kept the necklace under his clothes, so it was in perfect condition. He'd taken good care of it. Eugenia asked if he was leaving right now, and he said yeah, kinda hesitantly, 'cause he still had stuff to do. The Empire's definitely safer than that treacherous duchy, but a little caution never hurt anyone. Henrik advised her to buy quality stuff and not flash it around too much, to avoid drawing attention. The main character replied, looking a little lost, that she'd definitely keep that in mind. Out of the blue, Henrik chivalrously suggested a stroll, and they headed together towards this huge, majestic tree. Eugenia was thrilled. She even got curious about how old this ancient plant was. This girl definitely knew about the gun, and since that was classified info, Henrik was going to have to report it. He reminded Miss Eugenia that last time, she seemed to say she knew something about guns. Henrik was really interested in one important question. Could the lady actually fire that dangerous thing? The girl immediately exclaimed, totally stunned, that no way, she'd never even seen a gun that close before. Back in the heroine's old life, if some regular Joe had a gun, the cops would be all over him in a heartbeat. She was totally lost why Mr. Enric was even bringing this up. The guy wanted to say he had some serious reservations about her, but then he glanced at Evgenia, her hair flowing in the sunset, and he just couldn't bring himself to do it. So, changing his mind, he said he wanted to loan her a weapon for her own protection. The main character laughed and told him not to bother, 'cause she'd never use it. Since she turned down the gun, the guy held out a black card and told her to take it. Evgenia asked, confused, wasn't that card supposed to be like a super valuable keepsake? The guy replied she could return the card at their next meeting, or in a year, whatever. At that point, the main character decided she'd just bury the card right here, under this huge tree. Enric, totally confused, asked what she was even doing, watching her weird antics. The blonde explained that the master could use this little stone tower as a reliable signal. But Enric said skeptically, if someone kicks this little thing, the tower's gonna fall apart instantly. But Evgenia said with a smile that the world isn't all bad, maybe nobody will mess with the tower. Enric froze, staring at the smiling heroine as she suddenly started thanking him for the time they spent together. Evgenia held out her hand and added that these sincere words came straight from the heart. The man hesitated for a second, but still reached out his hand in return, shaking her palm. He thanked the young girl, and on that nice, warm note, our heroes parted ways. Joshua asked Evgenia why she was back so late. The beauty apologized and gently asked the kid to go to bed. Unaware that he was burning with curiosity, Joshua was totally blindsided when he found out Evgenia was, entertaining some gentleman. He was bummed because they didn't even bother to say goodbye to him personally. The main character snapped to it and immediately reached into her pocket, remembering something important. Now she could return Joshua's pendant and brooch. Evgenia promised they took really good care of them. When you come, Evgenia suddenly heard in her head, like an echo. The main character's wide eyes immediately showed pure, unadulterated confusion. The young woman thought Joshua said it, but the kid immediately insisted he hadn't said anything just now. Then Evgenia thought Selmia was talking to her, but the boy said he didn't hear anything either. Joshua chuckled and added sarcastically that, you know, that kind of thing happens to old folks. Even if Evgenia's only 21, she's way older than Joshua. So from his point of view, she's practically ancient. The main character smiled genuinely, feeling warm inside, knowing the kid was finally comfortable around her. Evgenia tucked the kids in and figured she should do the same, since she had a ton to do tomorrow and needed an early night. But sleep just wouldn't come. The main character was nagged by a persistent question. She definitely heard that question. When are you coming back? It seemed like that voice was the same one Evgenia heard in her last dream. But this time, she knew she wasn't imagining it. Evgenia yawned wide and realized it had been ages since she'd slept in a real bed. For the first time in forever, it felt so soft. So sleep quickly took over, pulling her into dreamland. The next day arrived, greeting our heroes with its bright new rays of sunshine. Selly happily told Evgenia she wanted to eat that weird thing on a stick, the one called cotton candy. The main character explained to the little one that she had to eat everything on her plate first. But the little one wanted to try other treats too, so Eugenia suggested they share. Eugenia started to freak out because she had no idea where Shushu had wandered off to. Turning her head, the young woman spotted the boy, standing in front of the smithy again, staring at the shiny forged swords. If he feels the same way as Selly, that's great. But there's no way Eugenia can afford to buy him one right now. The young woman walked over to Joshua and gently suggested they head out, trying to hide her sudden sadness. So, the heroes picked up the medicinal herbs they needed, plus all the basic supplies. Next, they confidently headed towards the information bureau. Stepping inside, Eugenia asked the friendly clerk if they had any maps of the vast Ace Empire. The main character explained to Joshua that they needed to figure out which road led to the Duke's lands. With a slight smile, the clerk immediately brought over what Miss Eugenia had requested. As soon as Evgenia and the kids stepped out onto the lit street, Selly spotted something super interesting. Suddenly, the little girl bolted, saying she was going to go check it out. Evgenia and Joshua both yelled at the same time for her to stop running right now. The little one froze in her tracks, like she'd hit a brick wall from their sudden loud shout. Then she grabbed her ears and yelled, asking why the grown-ups had to be such nags. She was genuinely ticked off that Evgenia and Joshua were, in her opinion, acting the same. The main character chuckled good-naturedly and patiently explained to Selly that if she fell, there'd be trouble. The little one immediately threw herself into Evgenia's warm embrace. Before bedtime, the girl showed the kids on the map the village where they were stopping for the night. Joshua was surprised to see how huge and sprawling the Jurassic Duchy was on the map. There's a good chance the twins' great-aunt's place is in the imperial capital. Selly, all bright-eyed and curious, shot her hand up and piped up that she had a burning question. She quietly asked if they were going to take a carriage again. After what happened, a carriage ride would be rough on Selmy. But since we're not in the duchy, it'll be a quick trip. After thinking it over, the blonde told the kids they'd be taking a high-speed train. To her delight, the kids were stoked. Eugenia was happy to see them smile, but once she drops off the twins, her job's done. The girl couldn't help but shudder at that depressing thought. Once they part ways, she'll go right back to her old, lonely life. Even though the main character used to want that, she's going to be super, super lonely. But Eugenia decided not to dwell on that sad future, trying to shake off the gloomy thoughts and live in the moment. She gently ruffled the twins' hair and told them it was time for bed. The train to the Duchy of Harasia leaves in 15 minutes, so all passengers, please board. Two tall, imposing men stared intently at the twins. The kids, in turn, got spooked by the sudden and intense stare from these strangers. The conductor, noticing their fear, reassured Miss Eugenia not to worry too much. Even though these guys look so serious, they're actually just here to escort you. The conductor politely led the passengers to a comfortable compartment and showed them where they'd be sitting. As soon as the train slowly started moving, the kids' faces lit up with genuine excitement. It was a first for them. Eugenia was finally leaving this place. Once she's gone, she'll have nothing to do with Enrique anymore. This sudden thought unexpectedly filled her heart with inexplicable sadness and longing. The blonde slowly turned her gaze to the window, taking in the picturesque sunset sky. Only one question raced through her mind. Would she be able to meet that person in a year? Soon, the train pulled into the bustling station of the Jurassic Duchy. Maybe because of its northern location, it was way colder here than little Joshua could have imagined. The main character suggested they prepare thoroughly first, before heading to the Duke's magnificent mansion. She explained that they had an important meeting with a noble lady coming up. To wary Joshua, it seemed a little sus, but with a sigh, he reluctantly agreed anyway. Already settled in a cozy hotel, the main character opened her travel trunk, where she'd definitely packed her clothes. Suddenly, with a slight pang, Eugenia realized she'd totally spaced on returning Enrico's handkerchief, the one he'd so kindly lent her. What to do? The girl wondered to herself. Once Eugenia gives that back too, there'll be absolutely nothing left to remind her of that wonderful man. Anyway, that's a year from now, so she decided not to get upset or start grieving early. The main character got a real fright when Joshua suddenly shouted her name. He called Eugenia a few times, then asked what they should do now, but she immediately apologized and said she'd be right back. Little Sally ran up to the girl, looked her in the eyes, and asked if she could come along. But unfortunately, the main character had to say no to the little one. Still, Eugenia sweetly promised that they'd definitely all go for a walk together tomorrow, or the day after. Joshua said that he and Sally would be waiting for her, so she needed to get back as soon as possible. And the boy also told the blonde to watch where she was going, so she wouldn't fall or follow any strangers offering treats. Eugenia dashed off, and Sally anxiously asked her brother if their big sis would be back soon. Joshua reassured his sister, saying it wasn't just anyone, it was their Evgenia, and she always keeps her word. Right now, we need to talk about something super important. Sally carefully approached her brother, and he revealed his cunning, well-thought-out plan to her. Joshua strictly ordered his little sister to keep this information top secret. When the door creaked open soon after, and Evgenia appeared, having returned, the kids jumped, startled. The girl happily rushed to the heroine, while Joshua suspiciously inquired if something had happened. It was super sus, because Evgenia looked incredibly joyful and happy. The main character showed a couple of small vials of liquid and offered to help the kids get their natural hair color back. The best time to do it is right now. Evgenia was taken aback when, undisguised, deep sadness suddenly appeared on Joshua and Sally's faces. She asked what was wrong, but the kids didn't answer, so Eugenia said she'd go get some fresh, warm water. Sally and Joshua exchanged a knowing, silent look, keeping their secret. Pretty soon, the kids' beautiful, natural blue hair color was back. Eugenia was genuinely happy that the color had washed out for both kids, so she offered Selmy to dry her hair first. Suddenly, the girl told the main character that she didn't like that color at all, even though it was her natural one. "When this color comes back," Sally started, scared and with a trembling voice, looking at her hair. But Joshua suddenly cut her off, angrily telling his sister not to talk such nonsense. Eugenia was stunned by the kids' unusual behavior. A terrible, unsettling thought crossed her mind. Could it be that the kids, to her great dismay, had a falling out while she was away? At the table, Eugenia shared her thought that it would be difficult for them to get into Duke Horatius's house right away. So, the girl started telling the kids what happened when she stepped out of the hotel for a bit. First thing, Evgenia headed to the local merchant, hinting that the village seemed like a decent place to settle down. The guy said they lived peacefully thanks to the Duke, and she replied that she wanted to meet him. But right now, even becoming nobility wouldn't get you a meeting with someone that important. Around the time his relatives were supposed to gather, Horace's place stopped accepting any visitors at all. The guy blurted out that the Duke was refusing even the Emperor, but the merchant quickly shut him up. Word is, the Duke usually comes back to his lands around this time of year. Now she's wondering if she should even go and take a look. But with things as they are, it won't be easy. Still, gotta try something, right? So, Evgenia sent Lady Jacqueline Horace a letter, saying she wanted to return 2 long-lost flowers. The heroine came up with a plan. As the relatives arrive, the number of servants will increase, so she'll get a job there as a maid. The thing is, this whole thing could take a pretty long time. Since Evgenia might run into the great aunt, Joshua asked her to take something to prove who they are. But the main character didn't think a simple brooch and pendant would really help them. I mean, it's not like it's a family heirloom from the Marchioness, so there's little chance some fancy lady would recognize it. That's when Joshua, with a look of total determination, decided to go for a different, more extreme approach. The heroine jumped up when she saw the kid grab some scissors and start snipping off locks of his blue hair. When they meet the great aunt, Joshua wants Evgenia to show her the hair. The girl anxiously asked the boy why he did that, and Joshua replied that his hair would grow back anyway. He was totally confident that Evgenia would definitely handle it. The main character accepted what happened, but told Joshua in no uncertain terms to never do that again. She told the kid firmly that she was going to show those hairs to the Duchess, no matter what. Eugenia looked at the neatly cut locks of hair and made a solemn promise. But soon after, to her dismay, the main character found out that the hiring was already done. They probably thought she was super unreliable, since she left her last job without a reference letter. Eugenia didn't know how she was supposed to get in there now. They say it's the hottest 2 weeks of the year, but you'd think it was freezing out here. Even Sally's coughing. The main character realized she needed to hit up the herbalist's shop ASAP, Gotta grab some anise and dried thyme. Why aren't you buying? Eugenia heard an indignant question, suddenly cutting through the noise. The merchant, totally pissed, was asking the customer if he didn't trust the word of an expert. The main character was lost in thought, realizing she'd seen that tall guy in the cloak somewhere before. No way she could forget a hottie like that. The blonde explained that the guy who sent him on this errand was super specific. It had to be Maverick stuff. The vendor exclaimed that Maverick and Heckin have the same kick. How many times do I have to say it? The merchant snapped, his voice tight with anger. But the handsome dude, despite everything, still looked doubtful. Finally fed up, the vendor lost it, chucked the herb on the ground, and told the blonde to get lost. 'Cause he was done with him. The guy immediately started apologizing, saying he didn't mean for things to escalate, but the vendor wasn't backing down. So the hottie gave the discarded herb lying in the dirt a hesitant look. The merchant jumped when the customer sheepishly said he'd buy it. He started scooping up the plant off the ground, muttering that it was about time the blonde made up his mind. The guy was about to name his price, but the main girl jumped in and stopped the deal cold. She stopped Blondie from jumping the gun and buying it, and straight up said the plant was totally useless. The dude was floored by the sudden news. Evgenia figured, since the boss asked Blondie to buy Maverick, he probably had joint pain. Maverick's dried, crushed into powder, and made into pills. It's an old folk remedy to ease arthritis pain. Heckin might look similar, but it's a completely different medicinal plant with totally different properties. Plus, if the boss has been taking Maverick for a while, Heckin will weaken its effects, and things will get even worse. Hearing that, the dealer looked totally lost for a second. But then he blew up, asking if the girl was calling him a cheat, and that he's been growing plants for 20 years. The main girl asked, suspicious, how he couldn't tell the difference between the herbs with that much experience. She suggested hitting up the drugstore down the street to see if she was right. The vendor muttered a curse under his breath, calling it a real kick in the teeth and blaming his lousy day. He started packing up his stuff real quick when Blondie told him to just turn himself in to the cops. But the swindler bolted, shouting, "Don't end up like me!" as he vanished into the crowd. After a while, the heroes finally got their hands on the Maverick, and Blondie thanked the lady, saying he couldn't have pulled it off without her. Evgenia told him, for future reference, to always go straight to the hospital and get a referral to a reliable pharmacy. Blondie jumped a little when the girl said she was going. Out of the blue, the handsome guy asked her if she happened to be from the duchy. The main character asked, totally bewildered, how he could possibly know that. Turns out, her accent's a little different. A regular Joe might not catch it, but he picked up on that unique duchy rhythm. If this guy's from the duchy, he probably knows that Eugenia's wanted right now. Blondie really wanted to thank the lady, so he asked her name, but she said she hadn't done anything special. So, it was time for her to go. She didn't want to stick around. The dude gently but firmly grabbed the ribbon on her dress and asked her to wait a sec. The guy kept insisting he wanted to repay her, and eventually, Eugenia gave in, asking him to let go of her. Blondie immediately started apologizing for grabbing her without permission, saying he acted out of line. She might think it was just a simple favor, but she really helped him out. "Maybe you don't believe me?" the guy asked with a soft and charming smile. The main character hesitated a bit with her answer, but the handsome guy already knew everything from her expression. A total stranger asking for her name, grabbing her, and talking about rewards. Anyone would be thrown for a loop. The blonde guy said he works for the powerful Juratian ducal family. He's low-level, but he can vouch for who he is. Hearing him say that, the main character froze in her tracks. The guy repeated himself. He wants to repay her for her kindness, because of which he won't be in deep trouble with his family. Looks like this dude really has no clue that Eugenia's currently wanted. The heroine decided to seize the opportunity and explained she's having a hard time finding a job right now. So, she asked if he could maybe inquire about any openings with the Duke's prestigious family. The guy grinned and promised he'd look into everything thoroughly for her. Eugenia was stoked when she heard it would only take a couple of days. The blonde suggested meeting back here at noon on that day. The main character gave him a wide, genuine smile, then thanked her new acquaintance. The blonde froze, staring at her radiant smile, like he was under a spell. So, finally getting some guts, he asked her again what her name was. The main girl said her name was Evgenia, and told him to just call her that. No need for formalities. The blonde guy said his name was Cheyenne. then gave a little bow and kissed the young woman's hand. He smiled, looking her right in the eye, and asked Miss Evgenia to take care of him. Getting to the Great Ace Empire took way longer than Elvry originally thought. Still, after reporting to His Majesty, he could finally get some well-deserved rest. Enrica was worried, wondering if Miss Evgenia had arrived safely. Elvry asked the captain if he was even listening, and the dark-haired guy just said he was beat. They'd been working non-stop lately. Things were probably way better when they were with Miss Evgenia. The captain was planning to see His Majesty right away, so he told Elvry to wait for him in the reception room. Henrik entered the throne room and gave the emperor a respectful bow. His Majesty praised the hero, admitting he'd been sweating bullets since he was later than expected. If Henrik had screwed up, the emperor wouldn't have been able to face his old man's wrath. The dark-haired guy sincerely apologized for causing him so much worry. Captain Shatton, the valiant Henrik, has returned after completing a tough mission assigned by His Majesty. He's stashed it somewhere safe and is keeping it protected. However, the hero, unfortunately, wasn't able to complete the additional task the emperor gave him. Henrik couldn't find the mysterious seal of the late Duke, despite all his efforts and the long search. The people who agreed to help them met with a terrible fate, so the location of the seal remains a mystery. But after checking out Hallant, Henrik figured out that he doesn't seem to have found the seal either. The emperor figured she was stashed somewhere that would be a real pain for my guy to find. His Majesty wanted to know if there was anything else important he needed to be clued in on. Henrik remembered his chat with Miss Eugenia about the piece, but decided to keep that under wraps for now. Instead, the guy decided to bring up something else entirely. Henrik was finally ready to hang up his spurs and leave his post at the court. He brought it up with the emperor again. It had been 3 years since his first, failed attempt to resign. But the emperor hated the thought of just letting his top warrior from the Chaitan elite squad walk away. So, His Majesty decided to send the captain on leave and suggested they revisit the conversation after he'd recovered. But that wasn't the answer Henrik was hoping for. The emperor got to his feet, gave a firm nod, and declared that's exactly how it was going to be. So, Henrik said he'd go, and His Majesty nodded, leaving the rest to the captain. The dark-haired dude figured it was best to put off that big talk for a while. Next time they met, Cheyenne had good news for the main girl. He could hook her up with a job, but it wouldn't be a great gig. The young lady would be stuck in the laundry, washing dirty clothes all day. Still, Evgenia was happy with anything. She was just thrilled that Mr. Shion had come through for her. The blonde guy said there was a chance for an interview right now. They could head over to meet the head maid ASAP. The main girl chugged the rest of her tea in a flash. Then she put the empty cup on the table and, smiling, explained that was her usual everyday speed. Now they could head to the Duke's mansion without wasting a second. The young girl didn't even see the guy walking ahead and accidentally bumped right into him. Eugenia started to fall fast, but Shion, with crazy reflexes, managed to catch her. She was stunned, her hands right on his rock-hard chest, and she quickly thanked him for the save. Then, snapping out of it, she pulled away fast, trying to hide how flustered she suddenly felt. Soon, our heroes arrived at Duke Harris's mansion. Eugenia had to nail this interview, so the kids could get through here safely. Cheyenne explained this was the servants' quarters, where all the staff and the head butler lived. First thing, the blonde smoothly escorted her to the headmaid's room. Then, Cheyenne politely knocked on the door and quietly announced it was him, waiting for a response. As the door slowly opened, a look of total surprise flashed across our heroine's face. For some reason, the headmaid herself opened the door and, smiling, announced she'd been expecting her. The main character introduced herself right away, and the headmaid replied that her name was Leah. The woman suggested they go inside and talk there first, and asked Mr. Shion to head to the butler. To Evgenia, it sounded like a polite but firm request to leave. Cheyenne totally got the hint, and smiling, wished the ladies a good and productive chat, then quickly took off. The headmaid, looking serious, asked Miss Evgenia to have a seat to start. Since the young lady had worked as a maid in an aristocratic family before, she should have a letter of recommendation. However, Evgenia said that she wasn't able to get one. It was a situation where she had to leave her previous job urgently, so she doesn't have that kind of document. Just like the heroine thought, it's going to be tough. You need a letter of recommendation to get a job with a noble family. The headmaid decided to lay it all out for Miss Evgenia, straight up. We finished hiring 2 months ago, so hiring Miss Eugenia now would look like favoritism. But Mr. Shion really put in a good word, and Mrs. Leia made it tough to refuse. Still, she doesn't even have a letter of recommendation, so it's a bit tricky, no matter how you slice it. Eugenia understood exactly what the head maid meant. She couldn't hire her permanently. Out of the blue, the woman announced that it would be difficult to give her a permanent position. However, the woman decided to give Eugenia a temporary spot until all the guests had left. For now, you'll be working as a laundry maid. It's hard work, but if you're up for it, sign here. The main character did everything and promised with determination to give it her all. In that case, be in my office tomorrow, sharp at 8 a.m., no late arrivals. Eugenia bowed respectfully and thanked her boss profusely, asking her to take care of her. The next morning, she tried to sneak out, but the kids woke up anyway. They wanted to see her off, even though she told them to go back to sleep. Still, she couldn't help but feel good about it. She started showering Sleepy Sally with kisses, but Joshua immediately yelled that he was passing on the smooches. She just patted the little tough guy on the head. The boy sternly told her to eat well, make friends at work, and respect her superiors. She was grateful that Joshua cared so much. She promised she'd do her best. Even though she said that, she was freaking out. It was her first day, she couldn't mess this up. She prayed for the courage to get through it. The head maid clapped her hands and told everyone to listen up. She introduced Miss Eugenia, saying she'd be working with them from today on. The main character smiled and promised to do her best. But she got a frosty reception. Eugenia thought they could at least acknowledge her. With the introductions over, the head maid told everyone to get back to work. The main character asked, looking lost, what she should do. A girl with red pigtails shoved a bucket of laundry at the blonde and told her to hang it anywhere there was space. Be careful though, don't damage anything. It's worth more than the laundry lady makes in a month. Eugenia reminded herself that she had to try hard for the kids. The maids started gossiping about how the master would be back soon, and they'd finally get to see his handsome face. No way the master's that hot, Evgenia thought to herself. But the main character doubted he could be hotter than Henrik. Evgenia decided to just drop it and get to work. Of course, the main character didn't expect the vibe to be this messed up. The maids definitely think she got bumped up to this job through questionable means, but Evgenia kinda saw it coming. The main character threw open the door and happily shouted to the kids that she was back. Just like she figured, the Duke's grub is seriously top tier. Evgenia handed Joshua the bag with the stuff to make a welcome gift, and then suggested they give cooking it a shot. Now that they've added the ingredients, Evgenia style, gotta stir it up to get it all mixed in. Once the soft hand cream was ready, she poured it into a wooden box. Let's see if they stay cold to her after they use this, Evgenia said with a crazy grin. Sally wondered why her little sister suddenly started laughing. The next day, the main character cheerfully greeted everyone. She immediately started handing out the stuff, asking everyone to take it and put it on their hands. Evgenia handed a bottle to the maid with the red braids, saying they could just pretend they were tricked. But the girl replied, annoyed, that she didn't need it. But she put the stuff on anyway. Suddenly, she felt her hands become miraculously moisturized. The maids immediately started asking where Evgenia bought it, and the main character proudly replied that she made it herself. This skill was simple, so the blonde didn't mind bringing more. The maids instantly warmed up and started telling the main character their names, which Evgenia was super happy about. Her charm was just irresistible. Several days passed at Duke Juracius's mansion. The main character was hanging up laundry, enjoying the fresh air. Just then, Mr. Cheyenne showed up out of nowhere and asked if she had a minute. The main character smiled and told him he didn't have to come around so often. A maid with red pigtails ran up and told Cheyenne they were taking good care of Evgenia, and the blonde thanked Jenny. She was surprised he knew her name, and Sheen said it was only natural since she was Miss Evgenia's friend. Jenny was thrilled, and the blonde remembered he forgot to give her something. He held out a small pouch to the main character and asked her to eat it with the others. It was nothing for Cheyenne, so the guy asked Miss Eugenia not to refuse. The hero said the Duke's relatives would be here real soon, so everyone needs to gather at the entrance. As soon as Cheyenne left, Jenny, with a sly grin, asked Eugenia what was going on between them. The main character brushed it off, but the maid went on, saying there's been a weird vibe between them since day one. Eugenia immediately remembered touching that guy's broad chest, and then told her friend to hurry up. There's no time to think about Master Cheyenne now. She needs to meet with that high society lady ASAP. There was no reply to Eugenia's letter. and it was hard to get into the main building where the high society lady lives. The main character started to worry that she'd get the boot the second she showed up. Eugenia was taken aback when Jenny said the head butler was staring right at her. And for some reason, Master Shun was standing next to him, wearing a good-natured smile. Seeing Miss Eugenia look his way, the blonde gave her a playful wink. That move was enough to make our main girl blush instantly. Now Jenny was even more convinced there was something going on between Eugenia and this total hottie. Suddenly, the maid standing next to Eugenia noticed Amy seemed troubled and offered to get her some medicine. But the girl declined and told her not to worry, saying she felt fine. The main character recognized her. She was in charge of the noble lady's clothes and bedding. Amy asked, barely audible, what she should do. Eugenia decided to find out if the girl was having any problems, but the brunette asked suspiciously why she'd want to know. The main character explained that it looked pretty serious, so she figured she might be able to help. Amy hesitated, unsure if she should spill the beans. But then Eugenia said, if it wasn't that important, then no big deal. And that pushed Amy to say her parents decided to come. Turns out the maid messed up the dates and told her parents to come today instead of tomorrow, but she wasn't done with her work yet. The main character realized this was her chance and volunteered to cover for Amy so she could head home without worry. She explained that they gotta help each other out during tough times. Can't keep your precious parents waiting. Amy immediately started thanking Eugenia, promising to pay her back for sure. The main character awkwardly suggested they cut it short before the boss chewed them out, since the guests were already coming. Right then and there, a family of aristocrats walked through the front door. The butler bowed to the guest and announced that His Excellency was currently out of the capital, so he'd be arriving soon. The aristocrat said thoughtfully that he should focus on raising his heir, not living it up in the capital. The butler replied that the master was taking that into account, so the gentleman shouldn't worry about it. The guy waved his hand, smirking a little, and said he totally spaced on saying hello to the lady. Doesn't seem like the owner of this place is exactly buddy-buddy with his family. Mrs. Leia clapped her hands and announced that everyone else could get back to work. The main girl said goodbye to Amy, telling her she could leave all the work to her. Eugenia went into the laundry room and got down to business. She was hustling, trying to get her part done super fast so she could pull off her plan. She was cutting it close, barely finishing everything. She heard the lady changing into her pajamas around 9. Which meant she just had this last thing to fold. Truth is, Eugenia was freaking out and really hoping this would work. The main girl clutched the snow-white handkerchief to her chest and silently begged Enric to help her out one more time. And then she hid the handkerchief in a clean towel. The head maid would come later and take it all away. But the plan was for the mistress to see it first. Eugenia was hoping Joshua's blue hair dye would transfer. The next day, the head maid sternly asked Amy what she'd done. The girl was clueless until Madame Leia asked if she wasn't in charge of the mistress's laundry. The head maid was furious that a servant had slipped something weird into the mistress's clothes. Amy started to explain, confused, that she hadn't done anything when Eugenia, passing by, confessed that she had. Eugenia had accidentally left her thing in the mistress's clothes, and now she wanted to know if the mistress had checked it. The main character's plan worked. The mistress did check it and asked to see the person who did it. The head maid suspiciously asked Eugenia if that was really her, and the blonde confirmed it, apologizing to Madame Leia. The woman barked at me to follow her and begged the lady for forgiveness. Finally, I'm about to meet the big cheese herself. The head maid walked into the greenhouse and announced to the lady that, as per her strict orders, she'd brought her the laundry maid. So, that's what the twins' great aunt looks like. The aristocrat gave me a real once-over. Then she dismissed the head maid, who said she was available anytime if needed. I bowed and told her my name was Eugenia. The aristocrat took a sip of tea and said I'd pulled a pretty interesting stunt with her clothes. I admitted I needed to see her about something, and that's why I took such liberties. I begged her to hear me out, promising to take my punishment later. Eugenia's face lit up the second the madame gave the okay. This high society dame is Jacqueline Hannah Horatia, known in social circles as the picture of a perfect noble lady. On top of that, she's been head of the Horatia dukedom for ages. The main character couldn't believe she was standing before someone like this, and even though she was shaking, she had to do it. Taking a chance, Eugenia asked the lady if she'd seen what she sent her. Jacqueline Horatia had seen everything and explained that she used to have the exact same hair color a long time ago. She hadn't seen it in ages. Blue, it's the color of her parents' family. When the blood mixed, it started showing up as an atavism. Only Jacqueline and her sister had that color, so the aristocrat sternly demanded to know where the maid got those locks. The main character revealed that she used to work at the residence of the madame's late niece. A beat of silence hung in the air. Jacqueline Garacia froze the second the maid told her those hairs belonged to Madame Carrington's niece's kids. The woman gave the maid a skeptical look. Eugenia explained that she brought the madame's niece and nephew here. The young lord and lady are alive and well. The main character could vouch for it. A look of surprise flashed across Jacqueline Garacia's face. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The main character quietly added that she brought the children from the Duchy of Halland, begging the madam to meet them. Eugenia understood perfectly that, as an adult responsible for the family, Jacqueline had to prioritize her. But the kids didn't leave home through normal channels, which means there could be trouble down the line. The main character started to get scared that this woman might not take them in. Eugenia dropped to her knees and started pleading with the aristocrat to help the young lord and lady. They asked her, just a regular maid, and she took on this brutal journey without a peep. The kids said their grandma would definitely help them, so Eugenia was desperate for the lady to meet them. All this time, Jacqueline thought the kids were gone. By the time she heard the news and knew what happened, it was too late. That's why she agreed that she had to see them, at least once. The aristocrat told Eugenia to bring the kids here and finally stand up straight. But the lady added, if this all turns out to be a scam, she'd never forgive Eugenia. Since our girl planted the blue hair, Madame Jacqueline figured she was the one who sent those letters too. The aristocrat said she ignored the letter because she thought it was some kind of sick joke. If these kids are really alive, she shouldn't have blown it off. But no more delays. Madame Jacqueline told Eugenia to bring the kids here tomorrow, nice and quiet. The main character bowed and promised to get it done. With that, Madame Jacqueline told the girl she was free to go. Evgenia smiled happily, and before leaving, said she was incredibly grateful for the lady's generosity. Late that night, the main character finally finished with the decorations. Actually, Evgenia was going to buy Joshua new clothes, like he asked, but she got so caught up, she totally forgot. Still, the girl was glad she at least got the decorations done, and really hoped Joshua and Sally would like them. I've been waiting, the voice sounded again, but this time Evgenia wasn't scared, and quietly replied that she'd been waiting for this moment too. Then, the main character peeked into the room where the kids were already asleep. Evgenia felt a little sad that there weren't any photos in this world. She would have loved to photograph these little ones at least once. They're really splitting up now. The girl won't even get to see them sleeping anymore, which made Evgenia's heart heavy. Before heading out, she wished the kids sweet dreams. As soon as morning hit and everyone was up, the main character set breakfast on the table, noticing Selmy's cheerful mood. The girl told the kids she had something for them. Opening the little box, the kids excitedly started looking at the pendants the main character had prepared just for them. Eugenia suggested buying some nice clothes that would go with the brooches. Joshua suspiciously asked what this was all about, to which the main character replied, didn't he want to go for a walk together? The blonde suggested they hurry up and eat breakfast so they could get going. Come to think of it, they hadn't all eaten breakfast together in ages, and if Eugenia had known it would be like this, she would have eaten with them more often. Soon our heroes arrived at the clothing store. Joshua looked at the building skeptically and said he was just gonna bail, which made Eugenia worried that he didn't like it. And then the young master blew up, asking what kind of money Evgenia used to bring them to such an expensive place. The main character didn't want to resort to this, but she had no choice but to ask Selmy to hold Joshua down. The little one grabbed her brother on one side, and Evgenia grabbed him on the other, and that's how Joshua's exciting arrest went down. The boy started to resist, but they still shoved him into the fancy store. Joshua didn't get why they needed to dress up so much, but Selly was stoked to get a new dress. The main character checked out the twins from every angle and happily announced that they looked like angels who'd fallen from heaven. Now Evgenia agreed with the saying that kids grow up faster every day. Joshua walked up to the main character and insisted they leave while they still could, because it was way too expensive in there. But Evgenia refused, arguing that they needed to wear clothes that fit their status. The twins froze as soon as the girl revealed they were going to meet their great aunt, so they had to be dressed to impress. The kids were instantly stoked, and Eugenia added that the meetup was happening tonight. Out of the blue, she stood up and formally told the young master and young lady that they needed to be on their best behavior and say hello properly. Now, they're supposed to head to the Duchy of Horatia. Young Master Joshua and young Lady Selmia did a solid job keeping up with Eugenia, even with all her quirks. The next day, the main character took the Marquis of Keratin's kids to meet the madam. Joshua and Selmia, following protocol, greeted Jacqueline Horatia and said they were super happy to meet her. But this wasn't their first time meeting. Madam saw the twins right after they were born. From the blue hair and golden eyes, Jacqueline knew it was them for sure and immediately gave them a big hug. The kids started crying because their great-aunt said sadly that they looked so much like her goddaughter. Getting the grandkids settled at the table, Jacqueline announced that until her son gets back, the kids will be staying at the residence as her guests. Evgenia decided to stick around too, at least until this whole kid-moving thing gets sorted out. The kids might freak out about such a big life change, so she wants to help them adjust as quick as possible. That's why she asked the madam if she could keep working at the laundry. The woman agreed, even though she was a little thrown by Evgenia's choice. The next day, our girl knocked on the young master and mistress's door. The twins were surprised Evgenia was done working already, but she explained she'd be back after lunch. Our girl was taken aback when Sally suddenly said she wanted her to treat them like she used to. Evgenia hadn't realized she'd been acting so distant, so she immediately apologized to the twins for being so thoughtless. Little Sally perked right up, and Joshua just quietly said Evgenia didn't need to apologize. He just told the heroine to get to work faster, and she's just now realizing she's already late. She barely made it to work on time. First things first, she had to wash a mountain of black gloves that she had no idea who they belonged to. Henrik immediately popped into her head, since he's always wearing them. Suddenly, a maid rushed in, saying the master's back, so everyone needs to gather. She was about to go with everyone, but then someone grabbed her arm. It was the Baron's kid, telling Evgenia to wash this tablecloth ASAP and keep it on the down low. All she could do was obey, even though she was dying to see what the Duke looked like. Just then, the front doors swung open, and the head of the family walked into the mansion. Henrik looked around and said, trying to sound cool, that it's been a while. First thing the Duke did was go greet his dear mother, who'd been waiting for his return and missed him terribly. Sitting at the table, Madame Jacqueline told her son she wanted to talk to him about something. She explained that a man had recently come here who'd helped Mia's kids, her goddaughters, cross the border. Enric asked suspiciously if they'd identified this guy and if the kids were really related to Mia. Jacqueline nodded to confirm and explained that the kid's hair color looked exactly like hers when she was younger. The Duke flinched as soon as his mother added that the maid who brought the kids was very kind. He said that first, he needed to meet this girl. The Baron's son praised Eugenia for doing a great job. As soon as he left, the head maid approached the main character and asked her to follow her. The maids guessed Eugenia was going to get chewed out again about the herbs, since she'd left some on the mistress's clean clothes last time. Turns out things were way worse. The big boss himself wanted a meet and greet with our girl. Eugenia was clueless. Was the head of the family really calling her out just because she didn't greet him with the other maids? Seeing the girl hesitate, the head maid told Eugenia to get a move on. Right at the door, she told the maid to head inside, and our main girl freaked out that she was going in alone. Once inside, Eugenia squeezed her eyes shut and immediately started apologizing to the master, saying this was their first time meeting. But the master replied that they'd already met and told Eugenia not to act like she wasn't expecting to see him there. But the main character really wasn't expecting to see Enric there. She immediately started bowing and apologized to the master, saying she was really happy to meet him again. The characters sat at the table, and Enric explained to Eugenia that he called her in right after meeting with his mom because he found out she brought his nephews. The main character explained that she brought the twins with her because there was no one in the duchy who could take care of them. So, she's got a request for you, sir. Evgenia wants you to let them stay here. In other words, the main character wants Enric to become their guardian. Enric got up from the table and asked Miss Evgenia if she knew what a development gathering was. Getting no answer, the man explained, "It's an event where the kids from the lesser family lines show off their skills. It's necessary to choose the heir who'll lead the Gerace family next. Oh, it's possible these two kids Miss Evgenia brought could undermine Enric's authority as head of the family. In that situation, is there any reason Enric should take them in?" The man explained that all the relatives had agreed to his method of selecting an heir through ability testing. So the question is, will they leave the kids alone in that kind of situation? Enric was right. This could be dangerous for Selmia and Joshua, and that fact started to worry the main character. Still, she was dead certain the master wouldn't abandon them. Aren't those who go against the head of the family's decisions basically stirring up trouble in the Duke Horace household? Henrik smirked and told Eugenia she was still sharp as a tack, so he agreed to keep the kids in mind. Hearing that, the main character's face lit up, and she immediately started thanking him. Out of the blue, Henrik asked her to call him by his name, like she used to. The main character agreed and was about to leave when she suddenly stopped and asked Henrik if he was sleeping okay these days. He nodded, and Eugenia promised to whip up another batch of medicine for him. But she didn't want to start any unnecessary rumors, so she suggested sending the jars through Joshua. Only, Henrik had a better idea. She could just leave the medicine in the stables, where his black horse lives. The main character smiled and said she'd better get going then, adding that she was really happy to see him. Henrik smiled warmly and told Miss Eugenia that he was also very happy to see her. As soon as the girl left, the butler, Cedric, knocked on the office door and informed his master that he had brought the guest, as he had instructed. A man entered and told Enric that they had a lot to discuss. The main character didn't know what to say to Joshua and Selmia. She had to warn them about her leaving. If she continues to stay with the Duke's family, she might mess things up, and the kids could get hurt. Eugenia promised to find them a better guardian than herself, so now her business here is finished. Entering the room, the main character noticed the children on the bed. Engrossed in something, she walked over to them and asked what they were up to. The twins immediately squealed in surprise, and Joshua exclaimed unhappily, asking why Eugenia hadn't knocked. Selmia immediately began to explain that they were practicing writing, but Shushu didn't want to show his handwriting because it looked like a worm. Hearing that, the main character suggested the boy write her letters, which totally confused him. Eugenia explained that they wouldn't be able to see each other every day soon. She revealed that yesterday she met with the Duke, who turned out to be Enrique, the guy who came here with them. Shelley excitedly asked if he was that handsome dude, and Joshua wondered if he was the guy who's great at riding horses. The main character nodded and sadly said that since the twins could stay here now, she needed to start looking for a new gig. After giving it a lot of thought, Eugenia decided that their contract was coming to an end. Joshua exclaimed indignantly that they hadn't even secured their spot in the dukedom yet. Had Eugenia forgotten about the agreement she signed with him? She even got a ring for it. The agreement clearly stated that Eugenia had to bring them to Duke Horace's family and set up a meeting with their new guardian. Grandma said that nothing was set in stone yet, and Eugenia replied that everything would be decided once the development meeting was over. That's exactly why Eugenia's still looking after them. The main character didn't expect the kids to react like that, especially since the ring she got in the contract was a fake. But there's no need to bring it up, so Eugenia decided to just let things play out. The kids will figure things out in time too. Eugenia crouched down and said softly that that was enough for today, and they'd talk about it tomorrow. Then she left the room. The main character knew all too well that if she got too close to the kids with her commoner status, their reputation would definitely take a hit. Besides, she's currently wanted back in the Duchy of Halleint, and even though it's not part of the Isa Empire, it'll still get people talking. Earlier, Enric suggested Eugenia become an apothecary. It wouldn't be bad to open a shop with medicinal herbs later on. The main character made a decision. When she talks to the kids again, she'll be honest with them. Even though the twins are still young, they're good friends, and Eugenia was sure they'd understand that she needed to leave. The Duke glanced out the window again. He knew Evgenia worked in the laundry, but for some reason, he'd never actually seen her. The head maid walked into the study and asked him to sign a document. Henrik was surprised to hear that someone had decided to quit. First, Madame Leia gave it to the mistress, but she said that since it was about the miss who brought the heirs, the master should handle it. The Duke coldly stated that he would take care of it himself and asked everyone to leave the study immediately. Alone, Henrik reread Evgenia's resignation letter. Then he clenched it tightly in his fist, not understanding whose decision it was for her to act this way. Evgenia could have just asked to be transferred to another position, but instead, she brought in a resignation letter. In reality, it shouldn't concern Henrik at all, but for some reason, he didn't want the blonde girl to leave. The Duke decided to take the statement with him for now and set it aside. Things would become clear to him later. He wasn't gonna let Evgenia slip through his fingers this time. The blonde finally got her long-awaited vacation. She decided to give the kids some snacks along with the mint leaves. Suddenly, she spotted Mr. Sheehan up in a tree and anxiously told him to get down. The guy immediately jumped down and told her he'd actually been looking for her. Touching Evgenia's hair to his lips, Cheyenne asked her with a gentle smile how she was doing. The main character thought to herself that a beautiful face is dangerous for her heart. She pulled back a little and quickly said she was fine, and that they hadn't seen each other in a while, probably because he'd been busy. Cheyenne replied that he wasn't that busy. It's just that his job requires him to keep a low profile. Evgenia didn't buy it and figured the blonde had messed something up at work and was now hiding from Cedric. Cheyenne asked her where she was headed, and Evgenia said she wanted to hit the market on her day off. Hearing that, the guy asked if he could tag along. Blondie swore nothing bad would happen, plus he could lay low if he was with her. He didn't want to screw up like he did last time. Maybe he could learn more about medicinal herbs from Evgenia. The main character had no idea he was still hung up on what went down back then. So, she happily agreed to go together and tell him about medicinal herbs. But first, they needed to change clothes. Cheyenne thanked her, stoked, and promised he'd study hard. And just like that, Evgenia and Mr. Sheehan headed to the market, and she told him all about medicinal herbs and their different types. They picked out a bunch of snacks for the kids. And eventually, it was time to head back home. Today was a blast. Cheyenne really learned a lot thanks to Miss Evgenia, which he was definitely happy about. The guy said he'd go, since Cedric would be looking for him, and the main girl waved, telling the blonde to be careful. Cheyenne winked at her and asked if they could go on another date sometime. It was news to her that they'd even been on a date today, but she quickly brushed it off, figuring Mr. Sheehan was just a big joker, and went to take the oil to Enric. Walking into the stables, Evgenia started looking around for the black horse. She quickly found the noble steed, who seemed to be watching her with interest. Entering the stall, the main character greeted the horse and said with a smile that he looked just like his owner. Mission accomplished. Evgenia wanted to give him the oil after it had aged for a month, but oh well, no time for that. Now she needed to leave, but suddenly she bumped into someone's back as she stood up. She immediately screamed loudly in fright. Jerking back, Evgenia stared in horror at the stranger in the cloak. It looked familiar somehow. Suddenly, it hit her. Master Cheyenne used to wear that thing, and because of her clumsiness, she'd just face-planted into a haystack. The guy helped her up while Evgenia was fuming, not understanding why he was still hiding under that cloak. Enric gently touched her cheek and softly asked what she meant by that. The main character froze, eyes wide, staring at the Duke, who was intensely studying her face. Evgenia immediately bowed and started apologizing to Enric, explaining she was just startled and hadn't recognized him. The guy suddenly asked if that meant she would have acted differently if she had known it was him. The main character nodded instantly and exclaimed, "How could she ever treat such a noble lord like that?" Enric started to say something else, then waved it off and asked her to please not do for others what she wouldn't do for him. And then, out of the blue, he suggested meeting tomorrow at the cafe in the square at 11, if she wasn't busy. Good news. Evgenia's gonna have a job, but Henrik told me not to sweat it. He's just gonna pass the assignment through Mrs. Leia. So, she can totally use that as an excuse to show up for the meeting. Since the dude was already there, she asked him to grab those bottles of healing oil she brought. Henrik was a little taken aback seeing so many. The blonde stammered, saying she doesn't get to see him often, so she had to make a bunch all at once. Henrik's intense, heavy stare made her blush. The guy turned around and asked her to meet him again tomorrow. She agreed and watched him go, looking totally bewildered. She couldn't sleep a wink that night. Evgenia was racking her brain, wondering what Henrik wanted to talk about that he'd call a meeting. Maybe she's in hot water and wanted in the dukedom. Or maybe it has something to do with the kids. As Evgenia approached the place, a waitress greeted her and asked if she was alone. The main character replied, flustered, that her companion would be arriving soon. She whirled around when she heard Henrik's voice, announcing there were two of them and asking for a quiet spot. The employee nodded and told them to follow her. Evgenia almost didn't recognize Henrik because he doesn't wear a suit in his daily life, but he really rocks that outfit. Seeing the girl standing still, the man turned around and told her to come on. He held out his hand, and the main character immediately snapped out of it. Sitting across from each other, the main character learned the reason for the meeting was her recently submitted resignation letter. The man pulled it out and handed it to Evgenia. The main character was surprised to see how crumpled the document was, but Henrik didn't reveal why that was. Anyway, Evgenia wrote it because she was planning to quit soon. No doubt, the Juracious family estate is a wonderful place, but she safely brought both kids here and now wants to start a new life. Henrik couldn't believe that Miss Evgenia was leaving the twins and going off to find a new life. The main character explained that she never considered the children a burden to her. Since Henrik saw everything from the outside, he should understand this perfectly, but he still says these words, not knowing the reason. Suddenly, the man told Evgenia that she had turned his life upside down, and now she claims she's leaving him. The main character choked on the words she heard and looked at the Duke in stunned silence. She whispered that everyone was watching them, so she asked Henrik to say right now that he just misspoke. But as sad as it was, the hero spoke the truth. Evgenia really had completely turned his life upside down. Ladies sitting nearby immediately began to whisper that this blonde was just toying with the feelings of a wonderful man. Eugenia jumped up and demanded to know why the Duke was treating her this way. But Henrik wanted to know why she wanted to leave, and why the Duchy of Horatia couldn't be part of her new life. The main character explained she didn't want to be constantly pressured into a decision she'd later regret. That's why Eugenia was hoping the Duke would give her some time to think it over. Hearing that, Henrik apologized for not taking that into consideration. The main character immediately replied that it was okay. Since the Duke had been good to her, she would accept his proposal. So, she thanked Henrik and promised to think again about staying there. Seeing the smile on Eugenia's face, the Duke froze for a few seconds. He said it was a good idea and decided to ask something else. He wondered if Miss Eugenia made this decision because of the kids, and without waiting for an answer, said that this wouldn't solve anything. Henrik and his mom agreed to give her a position as a nanny, but that doesn't mean she'll just be a regular servant for the kids. Eugenia will be with them and can take a break whenever she wants, so there won't be any obstacles. It's not just the kids who want this, but Henrik himself too. Grinning slyly, the Duke wondered if Eugenia knew about that. The heroine's face immediately flushed red, and she shyly promised to take it into consideration and think it over carefully. Actually, Eugenia was surprised that Henrik had called her here just for this, since he's probably really busy. As soon as the man replied that wasn't the case, the heroine asked him not to kid her, since his relatives want to meet with him every day. Henrik didn't deny it. They're practically willing to go to extremes just to pester him. So, spending time with Miss Eugenia is a much better way to pass the time, and the heroine awkwardly thanked him for saying so. The heroine handed the Duke a black card and said that borrowing it had given her a sense of relief. Eugenia had no clue that thing wasn't just something you hand out to anybody. It's only for the Chiton, a shadow squad directly under Emperor Isa, and it comes with perks. Even if the holder commits a crime while on a mission, they're untouchable. It lets them cruise right through checkpoints, no questions asked. Henrik lent it to her because he could track her location the second she used it. But now that Eugenia's here, there's no need for that, so he decided to ask what's up with their stone tower. The young woman replied briefly that it had become just a memory. They built the tower out of stones and wished to meet. The wish came true, and now it can be looked back upon as a memory. Henrik said that memory was a good one. Actually, it's not as bad as he thought. The main character just wanted to fill in for Aileen, help the kids, and bounce. But for some reason, everyone's suddenly clinging to her, even ignoring her background. Still, Eugenia could understand the kids. After everything they'd been through together, they want her to stick around. Honestly, the heroine was even happy when the twins begged her not to leave them. But what's got the Duke so hooked? A crazy idea flashed through her head, but Eugenia immediately dismissed it and decided not to jump to conclusions. First, the main character decided to get a buzz on, so she asked for a beer as soon as she walked in. The place was packed, since it was already evening. One of the Juratian household staff happily announced that she'd put a crazy amount of salt in their food, which made her incredibly happy. That young master was sucking up because his family was broke, and the girl was annoyed by his arrogant attitude. The main character sat down nearby, so she wouldn't miss anything. The maid was sure no one was paying attention to her, probably thinking she was just a kid. The girl was saying it was way more interesting than she thought it would be. Those two never leave the guest room, so the maid had no clue where they even came from. Hearing that, the main character slammed her beer mug on the table, scaring the crap out of the girls. And then she quietly said that she'd heard their whole conversation. Stepping closer to the maid, Eugenia coldly told her that she'd remember her face, and they'd definitely be seeing each other again. Then she bolted out of the place, totally ignoring the maid begging her to stop and explain. Hearing the knock, Joshua told whoever it was to come in. Seeing Eugenia at the door, the twins were surprised. But the main character just said she was curious to see how they were doing. She noticed the food on the kids' table, but the twins said they weren't hungry at all. Sally tried to say she didn't even want any meat today, but the kids' lies were totally obvious to our girl. She suddenly rushed over to the table where the food was. Just as she was about to try the steak, Joshua yelled that she couldn't eat it, telling Eugenia to stop. She immediately made a face, not understanding how they could give this to kids. Now she understood why they weren't eating. She forced a smile and asked if this kind of thing happened often. The twins looked down, and Joshua awkwardly said, "Yeah, of course," adding that the food must have been prepared wrong today. Eugenia was shocked by the kids' reaction because she realized things weren't right at all. While everyone was asleep, she would go into the twins' room to make sure they were sleeping soundly. She never imagined that after the contract ended, she'd not only be saying hi to the kids, but also personally taking care of them. So the rumors are going around that the kids are attached to her, huh? Anxious that she might somehow hurt the twins, the main character figured the best thing to do was play it cool and keep her head down. Eugenia told the kids that if the food tasted weird, like the chef messed up, they should say something. She was heading to the kitchen right then, so she told the kids not to sweat it and just hang tight for a bit. Sally piped up, all worried, saying she wasn't hungry at all and not to worry about it, and Joshua told Eugenia to stay out of it, said they could handle it themselves. But Eugenia couldn't help but worry, "'Cause there's something important the twins don't know yet," the main character said, all excited, "that people gotta eat to live." The twins probably don't even realize how important food is for kids who are growing up. That's why they gotta eat a lot, 'cause that's the only way they're gonna grow up big and strong. So the kids don't need to sweat anything, just eat up so they grow big and strong. That's the main thing. It's best if they leave everything else to grown-up Eugenia, 'cause she's gonna help out any way she can. Joshua couldn't believe Eugenia was even asking that. I mean, she's the only one they trust. Snuggling up to her, the kids cried out that she was the only one who hadn't abandoned them, no matter how tough things got. The main character thanked them for their trust and promised to be back soon. Eugenia couldn't wrap her head around how people could be so heartless to her precious kids. But Eugenia needs to chill. Her hands are tied. She can't fix this on her own. If Eugenia reports this, there's gotta be a limit to what even a noble lady will put up with. Maybe all she can do is give a warning, since the development meeting is still going on, which means there's only one play here. Elvry peeked around the corner and suddenly spotted the main character. The hero immediately greeted the girl cheerfully, to which Eugenia replied that it had been a while, and she seemed to be right on time. The man asked, confused what she was talking about. A look of bewilderment flashed across Elvry's face as the miss explained what had just happened. He immediately asked Eugenia to wait a moment while he went to the office. At that very moment, a meeting was taking place inside. Elvry approached his lord and apologized for the interruption, thus drawing his attention. He leaned in close to Henrik's ear and reported what Miss Eugenia had told him. The Duke suggested they take a break, reminding everyone that guests from the Keratin family were staying in the house. It's no secret that they've been through some really tough times recently. As soon as the main character was given the okay to enter, Eugenia wheeled in a table of food and thanked them for the permission. The main character introduced herself, said she used to be a maid at the Keratin residence, and that she had something to report. Confusion spread across the faces of those at the meeting, since they knew the Keratin family was dead. Everyone went silent when the Duke sternly demanded quiet. Eugenia explained she checked the twins' food, and it turned out the steak was incredibly salty, and the potatoes were undercooked. The Baron asked, bewildered, how this was relevant to them. He started chewing out the maid, saying she shouldn't barge into an important meeting with such a trivial incident. Eugenia tried to calmly explain that the Keratin family is a respected Marquise family in the Duchy of Hallant. 2 children from that family received an invitation from the noble Duchess Jacqueline Horacia and became guests in the Duke's home. Everyone started yawning. It was obvious the meeting attendees were annoyed to be sitting and listening to what a common maid had to say. Suddenly, Enric cut Eugene off, announcing that as head of the family, He had to take responsibility for the Grazia family's honor. Everyone in the family needs to be aware of this. Either way, this is a problem we need to deal with, right here, right now. The main character presented a steak that was served to the young master and young mistress. As soon as Enric tasted it, he immediately concluded the food was absolutely awful, and he was humiliated as the head of the Grazia family. The Duke decided he would officially apologize to the children as the head of the family. Enric immediately ordered the Baron to help Miss Eugene find those responsible, ASAP. The head honcho decided to leave it up to the victims. He suggested Miss Eugene tell the twins about it. The girl thanked his lordship for his help, to which the man replied it was nothing, and she could go. The teacup shattered, and an outraged scream echoed through the room. How could they do this? Jacqueline Horatia couldn't believe it. They weren't even 10 years old yet. The woman swore to the maid that no matter what, she wouldn't let this slide and would make sure the guilty parties paid. Slamming her hand on the table, Jacqueline demanded to know who dared to pull a stunt like this. Madame made it clear that she would find everyone even remotely involved in this mess. The main character quickly scanned the maids and immediately spotted the culprit. Since Eugenia knew who was responsible, Jacqueline ordered her to follow the family head's instructions and find those accountable for what happened. The maid tensed up as the blonde approached her. Cold sweat broke out on her face as Eugenia calmly said, "Well, well, look who it is again." The main character asked the maid to state her name and position. In a trembling voice, the maid replied that her name was Anne, and she was responsible for delivering food from the main building and preparing the guest rooms. But where's the proof she did it? All she did was deliver the food to the young master and mistress's chambers, like always. In that case, Eugenia could order punishment for all the staff who witnessed it, the ones in charge of the guest bedrooms. If Anne's not guilty, then one of her colleagues must be, including the cook who prepared the food. The head chef immediately exclaimed that he didn't pull any pranks with the food. The ingredients were bought with the residents' hard-earned taxes, and he cooks with the pride and honor of the Horatius family. In that case, the culprit also insulted his superior, the head chef. The maids immediately started whispering, urging the guilty party to confess quickly, or they might get caught in the crossfire too. Anne cursed inwardly. If she'd known things would escalate like this, she wouldn't have listened to the Baron. She collapsed to her knees and began to beg for mercy. Eugenia asked why she did it, and the maid replied that she just figured those kids didn't belong here. "I'm sick of hearing this!" Jacqueline Horatia roared. How did a maid even have the nerve to worry about the kids of some distant relatives? Anne started begging the mistress to spare her, but Jacqueline thought the girl should be apologizing to Joshua and Selmia, not her. Later on, those kids would be the ones deciding her punishment. And then Jacqueline would make it official too. From now on, the maids responsible for the guest bedrooms in the outbuilding will be working in the laundry. The girls were confused why they were being punished too, since laundry duty was the absolute bottom of the barrel. Jacqueline ordered everyone to shut their traps. The maids were supposed to be watching the kids, but instead they just stood by and watched. Right now, the mistress wanted to fire them all, but it's a critical time, so she decided to just switch up their jobs. Thing is, if the kids want to fire the maids, Jacqueline's hands are tied. The main character's jaw just dropped. Eugenia was totally digging the treat Selmia gave her. She asked Joshua if he wanted more tea, but the kid passed. The main character asked what the twins wanted to do, and Joshua said they'd go with whatever Grandma decided. As long as Eugenia was around, the kids didn't need anything, because now she was their personal servant. Selmia was stoked she could see her little sister way more often now. The main character smiled, realizing she should have done this ages ago. Then the kids would have had decent food from the start. All those eyes from the Duke's people were on them, and Eugenia's head was spinning. She just wanted to get out of there. But now the girls decided to stick around and take care of them. Evgenia smiled and told the kids she was super happy to be with them. She thoughtfully slid another dish from the chef towards the twins, and Joshua was like, "Hey, knock it off!" The man heard a ruckus coming from inside the mansion. The Baron figured those little guys were behind it. This was the liveliest development meeting ever. Henrik walked into the room and said he was clearly running late. He came to that conclusion because of all the noise. The Baron and Baroness immediately jumped up and happily greeted the head of the family. Henrik sat down and suggested they talk about the kids staying at Gerace's mansion today, not about them. They discussed the kids' food situation a few days ago, and now Henrik needed to share something. the Duke's planning to recognize Joshua and Selmia from the Keraton Marquisate as distant relatives. Henrik was dead serious about his decision. Everyone at the meeting immediately freaked out and begged the head of the family to reconsider. But Henrik didn't get why everyone was so against it. It was a request from a noble lady after all. Still, they were opposed, so the Duke asked point-blank why they were being so critical. The Baron asked if, once they're recognized as relatives, they wouldn't be able to participate in the Development Council. Henrik knew perfectly well that they would. Truth be told, the Keraton Marquisate is pretty much on its last legs right now. So, if Joshua and Selmia shine at the Development Council, the other relatives won't be happy, 'cause that's more competition. What's more, these kids are from Jacqueline's birthplace, so they're guaranteed protection and support from a certain noble lady. The twins lost their parents, so the Horace family, as relatives, has to take them in. The aristocrat asked the Duke to at least confirm that the Keraton kids wouldn't be involved in the Development Council. I mean, they don't even have the right to participate. The Baron added that those kids don't have a single drop of their common ancestor, Duke Horace's, blood in them. Hearing that, Enrico's eyes widened. The Baron immediately caught himself and tried to explain. "That's not what I meant," Enrico coldly stated. The twins are blood relatives of Jacqueline Horace, who was committed to the family for years. Is the Baron seriously questioning that fact now and denying it? The aristocrat tried to explain that's not what he meant at all, to which Enrico curtly replied that he didn't want to hear any excuses. He knows perfectly well how devoted the noble lady is to her family. But Baron Molin's claiming Joshua and Selmia ain't blood relatives, saying they got no claim in this family, even though Enric already pointed out they're related through his mom's side. The others just gave these nervous smiles, saying, "Of course, we all know how protective the lady is of the family's legacy." Knowing that, these family members dared to smear her and question her rights? Enric was seriously let down. Baron Molin immediately started backpedaling, apologizing to his lordship, saying he misspoke. The Duke told the aristocrat to watch his damn mouth from now on and make sure this kind of gossip doesn't reach her ears. Besides, Enric didn't call everyone here to ask for their opinions. He's here to announce a decision he's already made. Regarding recognizing the Keraton family as a branch of the Horatia family, Enric ain't considering anyone else's 2 cents. Of course, anyone who doesn't like it can hit the road. Clearing his throat, the Baron asked the head honcho if he could say a word. The head of the family's from a side branch too, but he's still got the blood of our noble ancestors flowing through him, which means these kids could be a problem. But Henrik wasn't buying any of it and shut the whole thing down right there. The guy headed for the exit, but one of the nobles stopped him, asking him to hear him out. Henrik just coldly told the Baron that he expected a much better showing from him at the next meeting. The Duke just walked out, not even letting the noble get a word in. Then he started laying into Baron Maureen for what he said, and the guy shot back that he's the only one who ever speaks up. The Baroness cut off the argument, saying that the most important thing right now is the children. Since the head of the Horatia families already made his decision, it was decided that the members of the assembly have to do something. We still have a shot. We just need to nip this thing in the bud before it takes root. Gotta stop it from growing. Late that night, Eugenia visited Jacqueline Horatia's chambers to deliver some medicinal herbs that should help her. The main character told the noble lady that she'd been trained by a healer when she used to visit the village pharmacy. Truth is, Evgenia had no clue that mugwort existed in this world, or that it was called Vimud. Jacqueline was so grateful to the maid. She'd been dealing with unbearable pain, but now felt a whole lot better. But the main character replied that the noble lady was giving her too much credit. She couldn't hold a candle to the doctor. Turns out, even the talented family physician of the Horatia couldn't help, but Evgenia managed to ease the pain. The main character thanked her, a little flustered, for the kind words. After apologizing for her rudeness, the head maid entered the room and announced that an urgent letter had arrived for the lady. Jacqueline Horatia immediately scanned the contents with a worried look. "First, we must send our condolences," the noble lady murmured quietly. The main character noticed that the lady was getting anxious and ventured to ask if something had happened. Turns out the governess who helped out at last year's development meeting and was going to help this year just bailed because her husband passed away. Come to think of it, Evgenia heard Joshua and Selmy were recognized as distant relatives, so they'll probably be there too. The main character asked the lady what exactly goes down at this development meeting. Jacqueline Harakia explained that the development meeting is like a showcase and training ground kinda. All the kids from the side families get together and get the same top-notch education from the Duke Horatia's family. They're watched for a few years to see who's got what it takes to be the head of the family. And the governess, she's the one who takes care of the kids and their whole lives, basically. She educates them and smooths things over when they get into trouble, handing out rewards or punishments as needed. Madame Halen always killed it as governess, and there's no one else to pick for the job right now. Evgenia told her not to sweat it, because the Heralthia family's sure to find a good candidate soon enough. The high society lady sized up the maid, real careful. If her social standing was just a little higher, that'd be perfect. The next day, our main girl was booking it through the downpour, because she was late for her mistress. She didn't even hear the bell ring, and Jenny and Amy were gone, leaving her all alone. Suddenly, the young woman bumped into a dude in a cloak. Evgenia clocked him right in the face and screamed bloody murder, because she thought she'd just met a real ghost. But when he let out a pained groan, the main character realized it was a person, except he was holding a hammer that, if you looked close, was covered in, well, let's just say it wasn't chocolate sauce. Realizing that, Evgenia took off like a shot. With the rain muffling the sounds and her not seeing the road too well, it was the perfect weather, for disposing of things. That's why she didn't want to come today. But now she needs to get somewhere with people. Out of nowhere, this guy grabs her arm. She yanks her hand free and starts screaming for help. She tripped on the stairs and went tumbling down. Before she blacked out, she saw some stranger looking worried, reaching out to catch her. Surprisingly, Evgenia didn't feel any pain, even though she definitely ate it on those stairs. When she opened her eyes, she saw Mr. Shion looking down at her, all worried, asking if she was okay. She instantly thanked him for saving her, but he brushed it off, saying it was nothing. He was just scared half to death. She suddenly smacked him and screamed like she'd seen a ghost, and those words made her face burn red. She couldn't figure out why Mr. Shion looked like that, and why his clothes were all messed up. The hero explained he found out the roof was leaking and came to help, but he slipped and fell right into the berry patch. Then Cedric spotted him, so he had to bolt to get away from his grumbling. Evgenia replied reproachfully that Shion should have at least said something, but it turns out the guy caught a nasty cold. He couldn't adjust to the chill in Horace's place, and running around doing errands didn't help either. Sighing heavily, Evgenia told him he needed to take better care of himself. The main character was about to leave, but suddenly felt a sharp pain in her ankle. Shion immediately caught her, guessing it was a sprain, so he asked her to sit down and let him take a look. He started wiping the steps, but Evgenia exclaimed that she'd be fine in a flash, and there was no need to check it. However, Mr. Shion insisted, because he wanted to see what condition her leg was in. After examining it, he concluded that her muscles were a little strained, so she should see a doctor. "What are you up to?" a familiar voice called out. The main character spun around instantly, looking up. Henrik was coming down the stairs, his face all serious. Mr. Shion explained that Miss Eugenia had tweaked her ankle, and he was just checking on her, and she said it didn't hurt anymore. The main character jumped up real quick and started bouncing around like crazy, trying to show them she was full of energy. But then a sharp pain shot through her ankle again, and she couldn't hide it. Henrik instinctively reached out to Eugenia, but froze when Shion jumped in first and asked if she was okay. The blonde guy took Miss Eugenia's hand and told her to be careful, since her ankle was still hurt. The whole time, the Duke was watching as the main character started smiling at the blonde guy and thanking him for his concern. Eugenia was caught off guard when Henrik suddenly grabbed her hand and said he'd call a doctor, and she could take the day off work. The main character was clueless about what was up with those two. If anyone saw this, they'd think she was so messed up, she'd need a week to recover. The girl threw her hands up and yelled, "I'm done here! I can walk myself, no problem." Suddenly, Evgenia got curious. What business did the Duke have here anyway? This staircase was for staff only. Enric replied that he was looking for Shion and told the blonde guy to follow him. Before leaving, the guy told her to make sure she wraps that ankle up good. And then he gave her some tasty candies as a sorry. The main character totally didn't expect Mr. Shion to take her hand and kiss it. Wishing to see her soon, she instantly blushed, unable to hide how flustered she was. Suddenly, Enric's icy voice cut through the air, telling Shion to follow him immediately. The blonde headed after the Duke, giving Evgenia one last wave. The main character waved back, not understanding how Mr. Cheyenne could act so cocky towards Enric. The esteemed Jaratia family doctor packed everything into his suitcase and announced that he was done with the treatment. He advised Miss Eugenia to try not to run or lift heavy things for a few days, so as not to make things worse. The main character never thought she'd be treated by someone like him, and it was even more awkward because Madame Jacqueline was in the room. The noble lady was glad that there weren't any major health problems because she got really scared when she saw Eugenia limping. The blonde noticed a huge amount of desserts in the room and assumed that the madam was expecting guests, but that wasn't the case. Enric sent the treats after hearing that Eugenia was having a doctor's visit today. The heroine's first thought was that Enric did it because of those candies, but then she realized that the Duke was just worried. The butler and the head maid entered the room and informed the madam that a guest had arrived at the mansion. But Jacqueline reminded them that they don't receive guests even in the worst weather, so she asked them to escort the guest back. Cedric explained that the guest had arrived with a letter of recommendation from Viscountess Halen, who decided to work as a governess. Maybe because she couldn't make the development meeting, the noblewoman decided to send someone in her place. First, we need to verify the authenticity of Lady Halen's letter of recommendation, so Jacqueline allowed the guest to enter. With that, our girl got up to leave, promising to return tomorrow to apply a compress. And get this, Eugenia had brought a cane ahead of time. But the noble lady didn't want to take it, felt too weak with it, but our girl insisted. Eventually, she managed to convince Lady Jacqueline, who asked Eugenia to watch her from the side to make sure she didn't lose her balance. Our girl smiled wide and told the noble lady that she could count on her. She asked her to speak up if she felt any discomfort, and then both women set off to greet the arriving guest. Jacqueline figured getting to the Horatius estate was rough, but the woman's voice assured her the journey went smoothly. The visitor asked the noble lady to take the letter, saying it was a little damp, but still readable. Suddenly, our main character realized she recognized that voice from somewhere, but the hood made it impossible to see the person's face. As if reading her mind, the visitor immediately apologized to the noble lady, Jacqueline Horatia, for not removing her hood. The main character's eyes flew wide open in shock. The visitor's face also registered surprise. Standing right in front of her was Aileen Blair, the very same one who was supposed to have saved those kids from the mansion at the cost of her own life. The girl instantly recognized Eugenia and asked in astonishment how she got here. Suddenly, Aileen lunged at our main character. She gripped Eugenia's hand tightly, making our heroine cry out in pain and beg the teacher to let go. Enric yanked Aileen's hand away, real rough, and snapped at the newcomer, asking if she couldn't see she was hurting Eugenia. It was kicking off downstairs, so the Duke came down to see what all the commotion was about. Jacqueline explained the deal. Madame Harlan couldn't make it, so she sent someone in her place with a letter of recommendation. Aileen jumped right in, saying she was from the poor Baron Blair family, which is why she had to work as a tutor. Turns out, she and Miss Eugenia already knew each other. The main character explained that Aileen had tutored Joshua and Selmia for a while at the Marquis Carrington's place. Aileen confirmed that the late Marquis Carrington, bless her soul, gave her the chance to live with those adorable little angels. Then she started apologizing to Eugenia, saying she was just really surprised to see her here all of a sudden. She asked the girl, all hopeful, if Selmia and Joshua were here too. Her eyes went wide as saucers when the main character said she'd brought them along. Aileen dropped to her knees, thanking Eugenia like crazy, because not seeing her kids, she thought something terrible had happened to them. Being out of town and hearing about the Carrington situation, her heart almost stopped when she couldn't find the twins. It was unbelievable they'd made it here safe and sound. To which Enric replied it wasn't divine intervention, it was Miss Eugenia's doing. The Duke was curious how she'd crossed the border, and Aileen explained she'd managed it thanks to the help of a family. She worked as a caregiver for a while, and that family helped her out. Enric clearly didn't buy it, but Lady Jacqueline told her son to knock it off. That's enough chit-chat. The noble lady asked Cedric and Leia to show the teacher to a room where she could rest. Aileen thanked the lady for her hospitality. Jacqueline turned to Eugenia and told her she could go too. The main character nodded, still kinda tripping out that she'd met the noble Aileen in a dump like this. It felt totally bizarre, and Eugenia didn't know how to play it. Jacqueline told her son she's feeling her age, her joints are getting worse, and even the doctors are stumped. Henrik suggested sending someone to the capital to find a top-notch doctor, but she shot him down. Ever since Evgenia showed up, she's been feeling way better, 'cause that girl's sharp and knows her stuff. Plus, that maid is a stone-cold fox, smart as hell, and quick on the uptake. Jacqueline's even been toying with the idea of keeping Evgenia around to take over from Miss Leia. The aristocrat heard the girl showed up at that family shindig and called them out for treating the twins like dirt. That shows some real spine, which makes her prime material for head housekeeper. Though right now, Evgenia's got her hands full looking after Joshua and Selmia. But twins can't stay kids forever. They grow up and gotta leave the nest to spread their wings and see the world. The woman gently touched her son's hand. Just like her firstborn, Henrik, becoming independent at such a young age. The man looked away, not saying a word. Anyway, Madame Jacqueline was saying that since Evgenia is a foreigner, it'll be tough for her to settle down and live here. It'd be good if she met someone special among her co-workers. The woman started suggesting people, but Henrik cut her off and asked why she'd called him here in the first place. Catching herself, Madame Jacqueline explained she wanted to talk about the young Baroness Eileen Blair. She was thinking of hiring her as a tutor for this development group and wanted to get her son's opinion. Henrik knew damn well he couldn't object to hiring her based on her past conduct, so he let his mom do whatever she wanted. Madame Jacqueline smiled and thanked her son. She was happy he wasn't giving her any grief. Just like Eugenia figured, Aileen got hired as a governess. The girl was great with kids in the novel, so no worries there. The main character led the teacher to young Master Joshua and young Lady Selmia's room. Aileen asked, all excited, if she could open the door, and the main character was like, "Yeah, go for it!" The girl threw open the door right away and called out to Joshua and Selmia, all happy. Joshua immediately snapped, all annoyed. "Who's being so rude?" Aileen covered her mouth with her hand and couldn't hold back the tears. She rushed over and hugged the kids tight, saying, "I'm so happy you're really alive." The twins winced and begged the teacher to loosen her grip, saying they could barely breathe from her hug. The main character immediately rushed to the twins, seeing that they were in pain. But suddenly, Eileen rudely shoved Eugenia away with her elbow. The main character instantly fell to the floor, hitting herself hard and wincing from the pain in her leg. Seeing this, the twins started crying, but Selmia hugged the children even tighter. A crazy smile appeared on Eileen's lips. She was now next to the children she had raised. The woman looked tenderly at the children and confessed that she had missed them terribly all this time. Selmia broke free from her grasp and threw herself into the main character's arms. Eileen couldn't believe what she was hearing when the maid Eugenia started comforting the young lady. With a trembling voice, the heroine asked Selly if she really didn't remember her. Joshua grabbed Miss Eileen's hand, totally shocked, and asked how she got here. The heroine explained that as soon as she heard the news, she rushed to Marquis Carrington's mansion, but couldn't find the twins. She felt sick to her stomach. Eileen was terrified she was too late. That's how it was. Eugenia kept wondering why the person who risked their life to care for the kids hadn't come to them. The main character calmed Selmia down and suggested they go to the teacher, who was clearly thrilled to see her. The girl obeyed, and Eileen immediately apologized to the young lady if she had startled her. Eugenia was glad Eileen had calmed down. But what was with that fiery look? No matter how much she missed the kids, to be that oblivious to her surroundings, the main character started to wonder if Eileen had always been like this. 3 days later, in the main hall of the Herecius mansion, Enric greeted everyone and announced he was about to introduce the teachers. First up was Kashino Fenon, and he announced he'd be teaching the history of the Isa Empire this year. A lady named Liana Bashkal is going to be in charge of ballroom dancing and elocution. Last was Aileen Blair, and she said she'd be teaching etiquette and basically overseeing everything in their lives. Seeing Joshua and Selmia's happy faces, Eugenia knew they were stoked for this. The heroine's happy to see the kids so excited, but she wonders if the kids from the lesser families will look down on them. Enric announced that classes officially start tomorrow. Like every year, the kids will study different subjects for 5 weeks, and at the end of the week, everyone shows off what they're good at. Now the noble Lady Jacqueline could give the kids some words of encouragement. She told them everything they learn here will be a valuable asset, so they need to give it their all. The lady promised they'd be well taken care of during the development gathering. Aileen smirked, telling her to trust them. Classes should be over by now, so our main character needs to hurry and get these snacks to the kids. Just as Evgenia was thinking Selmia would finally get to eat a ton of her favorite sweets, someone put a hand on her shoulder. It was Aileen, the teacher. The girl was grinning like crazy. and our main character couldn't figure out why she was creeping people out like this. Out of nowhere, Aileen asks if these are snacks for the young master and mistress, and Evgenia nods. Hearing that, the teacher told Evgenia she's working really hard. The girl asked if she was busy with her job, and our main character replied that it's what she's got to do. Aileen pointed out that it's lunchtime, and Evgenia can't even eat properly, just carrying snacks around. So the teacher asked her to let her take the snacks to the kids. She promised to take care of the snacks for Joshua and Selmia, thanking Eugenia one last time for bringing them. But the main character stopped the cart and told the teacher it wasn't necessary. This is food for the elite, so she couldn't be lazy about delivering it, or at least saying hello. If Eugenia really wanted to, Aileen wasn't going to stop her. She knocked on the door and called out to the kids, saying she brought them a snack. The twins happily swung the door open and immediately asked the teacher if Eugenia was with her. Spotting the main character, they ran right over to her, completely ignoring Aileen. She reminded them she was there, saying she was feeling a little down and wanted to offer some tea and a chat. Joshua agreed and asked Eugenia to get everything ready. Pouring the fragrant tea, the main character asked the kids if they liked the lessons. The young master was all, "Hell yeah," right away, but Selmia was like, "Meh, not that interesting." It was stuff she already knew, you know? Aileen jumped on Selmia immediately, telling her to sit up straight, saying you can never forget your manners. Eugenia told the young lady she hit the market yesterday, and it was packed with all sorts of delicious treats. So she was thinking of Selmia and got her a ton of them. The little one reached for the sweets, ready to dig in. But Aileen, the teacher, snatched her hand away, quick. She explained to the young lady that she couldn't have any of that stuff. Selmia tried to talk her into it, but Aileen told her to just listen. And then she gave Miss Eugenia a stern talking to, telling her to lay off that kind of stuff in the future, 'cause it's bad for Selmia's health. Aileen knew Eugenia was the kid's personal maid, but she didn't realize she was so lacking in foresight. "I understand your concerns," the main character said calmly. She worries about the young lady and young master just as much as teacher Aileen does, because she's been looking after them for so long. Aileen chuckled and asked her to leave those worries to her from now on. The twins were getting a weird vibe from the teacher's behavior. Aileen immediately smiled and told the kids not to worry about what Eugenia said, since she'd been looking after them for a long time too. So now the twins could trust only her. Suddenly, it hit the main character. Did Aileen see her as a rival? Unexpectedly, the girl walked up to her, put her hands on both her shoulders, and asked if she'd finished all her work in the room. She advised Eugenia not to push herself too hard. "All right, the maid's done her job, she can scram." And then, Miss Aileen just straight up kicked the main character out. Elvery got back from the funeral pretty quick, and His Excellency told him to get back to his original assignment. The aide agreed, but then he got all confused and asked what Mr. Cheyenne was doing there. The blonde's lips curled into a smile, and he said he was just bored out of his skull, nothing else to do. Besides, the second he steps out, the Duke's on his tail looking for him. But Elvery pointed out that His Excellency hasn't even glanced out the north-facing window lately. He's been watching carefully the whole time, and the aide totally gets it, 'cause Mr. Shune's got a face that could launch 1,000 ships. Henrik told him to cut it out with that talk and asked about the results of the task he'd assigned the aide. Elvery said, on the way back, he checked out the dam, and the water's right at the top. Hearing this, Henrik ordered him to reinforce it ASAP. Cheyenne was clueless, wondering how it could rain with such clear skies. Totally not getting that the weather up north is impossible to predict. Henrik knew damn well he needed to pay extra attention to that this year. The twins excitedly told their little sister that the sweets were super yummy, and Eugenia told them to take it easy and not wolf them down. With a huge smile, Selmia confessed she'd love it if the girl came to visit every single day. Joshua told his sister to keep her voice down, just in case, because teacher Aileen can't hear this. The main character told the kids to eat calmly, even though after that day, Aileen wouldn't even let her near the twins. Luckily, she's out of town today, and Eugenia barely managed to meet with the kids. But they can't keep seeing each other like this. Joshua decided to spill his worries about teacher Aileen, who's been acting really weird lately. I mean, she just up and left, and even though she asked how they'd been, she didn't really say much about herself. Eugenia listened carefully and told him to be careful. If something big went down, teacher Aileen might just be trying to block it out. Plus, if she finds out they're sneaking around, Eugenia might never see the twins again. They could even throw her in the slammer for disobeying orders, probably. Eugenia grabbed Joshua's leg and begged him never to forget her. And the kid was all, "What do you take me for?" A smile instantly bloomed on the main character's face. If even the kids are picking up on it, there's definitely something up with Aileen. Eugenia decided to keep an eye on things until she figures out exactly what Aileen's up to. A little later, the main character felt totally thrown off when she heard the question about who she's seeing. She had absolutely no clue why Madame Jacqueline Gracia would ask something like that. The noblewoman exclaimed that there aren't many people in the empire that Eugenia knows, and she must be super lonely. The second Madame Jacqueline even suggested setting up Evgenia with someone. Henrik jumped up like he'd been shot. The room went dead silent, and both women just stared at him, totally surprised. The Duke mumbled an apology, saying he'd forgotten about something super urgent. The main character was thrown for a loop when Henrik asked her to come with him. Madame Jacqueline, totally bewildered, asked her son what he needed Evgenia for, and he just said he had a headache. The tea Evgenia had made earlier was actually pretty effective, so the Duke was planning on having some more in his study. Following behind him, the main character asked timidly if his head was hurting badly. The guy said it's been a little rough lately, and he was thinking of taking a short walk before heading back. The main character suggested going to the garden, since a light walk could help with insomnia, and then she could make more tea. Suddenly, the dude just stopped dead in his tracks. Then, he turned to Evgenia and asked if she wanted to take a walk with him. Seeing the young girl's confusion, the Duke offered her his hand and asked if she was sure she didn't want to. Evgenia immediately blushed at the unexpected offer, but she took his hand, and our heroes headed off into the garden. Enric asked if she was having any problems here, and Evgenia replied that everything was good in its own way. There's just one thing she'll have to get used to, but the main character was sure that she'd get used to it, and eventually she'd have a little more free time. Evgenia took a few steps forward and added that then she could look around the area, and then she'd realize that she was ultimately all alone. Truth be told, Evgenia already felt that way. Joshua and Selmia had gotten busy, and now it was hard for her to see them. Suddenly, the girl realized she was running her mouth way too much. She instantly felt awkward and blurted out that she was just rambling nonsense to Mr. Enric. Stepping back, the main character explained that she usually never does that. Eugenia didn't see the step behind her, so she immediately started falling backwards, letting out a startled yelp. But Enric caught her right away, pulling her close. Their faces were super close at that moment. The man said, annoyed, that she really was a handful to deal with. The main character thanked the man, flustered, for catching her. Looking away, the young girl said that Enric was always helping her out. Eugenia looked back at the man, who was staring at her in surprise, unable to say a word. His hand slowly released her waist. The main character was taken aback when Enric started massaging his nose, and immediately asked anxiously if he was okay. She had absolutely no idea what Enric was thinking about right now. He, on the other hand, looking at Eugenia's beautiful face, realized that from now on, things were going to be very difficult for him. The Baron Molin's son asked the other kids if those nobodies from the disgraced family didn't bother them. My dad's always on my case, asking why I can't stand out. The boy suggested teaching the twins a lesson, convinced that the others wanted it too. But the kids didn't think it was a good idea, since not long ago someone had messed with their food, and the Duke and Grandma had stood up for them. The Baron's son exclaimed, "Then what else are they supposed to do? Because he was sick to death of seeing them there." The girl froze, her hand still reaching for the handle, as the young master exclaimed that it was all because of that servant, Eugenia. If only she hadn't ratted to the Duke, things would be different, Eileen overheard. A plan instantly formed in the heroine's mind. If it worked, she could easily get rid of the dead weight. Meanwhile, Evgenia was on cloud 9 because last night was truly amazing. She couldn't believe she'd been in Enrico's arms, and he smelled so damn good too. Whatever the scent was, the main character couldn't just go looking for it out of the blue, even though she really wanted to. Evgenia was taken aback when the young lady and young master suddenly appeared next to her. Joshua immediately asked, annoyed, what she was grinning about like that. And the heroine replied, nothing, really. Suddenly, Selmia excitedly announced that teacher Eileen would be having a picnic in class tomorrow, and the maids had to come along. The main character promised to prepare, and asked the twins if there was anything else important. Looking down, Joshua explained that the teacher had asked them to bring something that belonged to their parents. But he and Sally have nothing except those gemstones. That's why the twins were so scared of losing them at the picnic. Eugenia was floored. How could Aileen suggest bringing their parents' things, knowing why Joshua and Selmia came here? Clutching her apron, the girl told them not to worry about it. She turned the jewelry into brooches, so the kids can just pin them to their clothes and not lose them. Joshua sheepishly agreed that she was right. The main character smiled and told the twins not to stress too much and to have a blast. The kids promised they would, and Eugenia immediately perked up, asking what she should cook. But the next day, all of the main character's enthusiasm vanished. Jenny asked why they were asked to bring the kids, since now they have to wait for them to get back. They were so far away, on the other side, which made the main character worry if everything would be all right. But Aileen really cares about Joshua and Selmia, so nothing bad should happen. If things go sideways, the main characters decided she's going to take a little boat trip. Jenny promised to cover for her friend if she suddenly felt like going for a boat ride. But Eugenia turned her down. It was just clear skies, and now it's suddenly raining, so Jenny's maid's running back to the mansion for some umbrellas. Seeing the butler help the kids into the boat, it's pretty obvious they're heading back. But suddenly, something caught the main character's eye. Aileen was holding Joshua down while he tried to break free, and this whole scene just raised a ton of questions for Eugenia. The young master kept complaining, but the teacher still managed to get him into the boat. Once the kids made it across to the other side, the main character gave the twins some props. She was curious if the kids had a good time at the picnic. The main character flinched when Joshua quietly called her name, his voice cracking. She immediately covered the kids with her umbrella, crouched down, and asked worriedly if something was wrong. The boy confessed through tears that they'd lost their brooches. The teacher said to show each other or their parents, so they had to take them off. But they think they lost them then. The other kids started laughing at Joshua for crying over something so trivial. Baron Molin's son sneered, saying the jewels were recently sparkling in the grass, and he thought they were just trash. However, if Joshua agreed to get on his knees, young Master Ranville might just reveal where they were. Joshua grabbed the kid by the collar and yelled that it was a keepsake from his parents. The main character immediately pulled the young master away and explained that wasn't okay, but the boy kept struggling. Just then, Aileen appeared, indignantly asking Joshua and Ranville what all the commotion was about. She ordered them to stop bickering immediately and get back home, since it started raining. Joshua tried to explain that the brooches were on the other side of the river, but the teacher coldly told him to obey her. Suddenly, Eugenia stepped in front of the boy and asked the teacher that if she decided to give a lesson like this, shouldn't she be more careful? Aileen scoffed and wondered if the maid was really trying to interfere with her teaching methods. But the main character explained that the brooches Joshua and Selmia brought were the only things left of their deceased parents. Teacher Aileen knew that perfectly well. But the woman replied that she was simply fulfilling her duty as a teacher, so don't go saying her decision was wrong. So Eugenia should go get the things, since that's her job as a maid, but the main character was planning to do it anyway. Wiping away tears, Selmia said that the brooches were probably still at the picnic spot. The main character promised that she would definitely find the jewelry. She'll be quick and back in a flash. Meanwhile, in Duke Enrico's office, the guy agreed with his assistant's suggestion. Something like that couldn't happen again. Before things got even worse, we need to nip this in the bud. At that very moment, Enrico had no idea where his decision would lead. The main character was completely submerged, and she had no idea what to do since she couldn't swim at all. Suddenly, Evgenia heard a voice telling her to just hang on a little longer. The glowing butterflies said they'd found someone to save her, so Evgenia just needed to hold out. With the last of her strength, the girl grabbed onto a piece of wreckage. Finally, she could breathe normally again. She was starting to think she was a goner for sure. Good thing the brooch is okay. It would have been a real problem if it got wet. Better pin it to my clothes. Can't risk losing this thing. No way. Evgenia squeezed her eyes shut and started praying she'd be okay and make it to shore safe and sound. Right then, Henrik showed up, yelling Evgenia's name like crazy. His heart was pounding out of his chest. The main character was shocked to see the Duke. Henrik ordered them to get a rescue boat out there, stat. But Jenny said they were all gone. In that case, everyone needs to brace themselves. The guy immediately yelled at Evgenia to look out, because a huge wave was coming right at her. It crashed right over her, pulling her under and taking her breath away. Eugenia slowly opened her eyes the moment she felt a touch on her cheek. Enric jumped into the water right after her, and then his lips met hers, giving her that sweet, sweet air. Once they were both on the shore, she started coughing like crazy, trying to get all the water out of her lungs. Eugenia's eyes were starting to droop, but she knew she couldn't fall asleep, or Enric would freak out. The guy scooped her up in his arms and said they were heading to a shack nearby, since there was no way they could cross the river right now. Luckily, it's maintained every so often, so there's food and supplies there. No sweat until the weather clears up, but Eugenia still looks like she's in rough shape. Enric figured he needed to throw on some more logs. Suddenly, a glowing butterfly appeared right in front of his face. After taking a good, hard look, the aristocrat realized he'd seen that glow on the shore not too long ago. This ain't just a hallucination, that's for sure. It's not some firefly either, which is what you might think. So what the heck is it? Suddenly, a glowing butterfly landed right on the young woman's forehead. And just like that, the main character's whole body started radiating this intense, bright blue light. Henrik was totally clueless about what had just gone down. He was completely lost, trying to figure out what the heck was happening. Gently touching the main character's hand, the guy decided that didn't matter right now. "The important thing is you wake up okay," the Duke said, and kissed Eugenia's hand. The main character slowly opened her eyes as soon as she heard the unfamiliar voice call her name. A fairy was sitting right in front of her, and Evgenia started to think she was dreaming. Evgenia was stunned when she saw her childhood body. Meanwhile, the fairy flew up to the little girl and announced that a girl so young shouldn't be going to the afterlife yet. The glowing butterflies exclaimed that she couldn't be saved. That person didn't keep their promise back then either. The fairy knew that perfectly well, but without that stone, they couldn't travel to the new world. The queen decided to trust a human one last time. Only one soul can enter one body. The main character watched, as if hypnotized, as a small puff of cloud came out of her mouth. The little cloud started to babble something in a panic, but the queen immediately calmed it down, saying that souls rarely cross worlds. The fairy offered the soul a deal. If it brought her the wish stone and the transformation stone, then she would give it another chance at life. Cloud nodded firmly, agreeing to those terms. But right now, that's a no-go, because Eugenia's soul is way too young for that kind of thing. The queen's decided to turn her soul into a seed and help it grow. She'll only leave the memories that matter, and Eugenia will forget all the pain she's been through. In return, one day the girl will grow up, open her eyes, and keep her promise. The stones will guide her back. And finally, the queen will bestow a blessing on our girl, so she can hear what every blade of grass is saying. Eugenia froze the second the fairy looked right at her. Suddenly, the queen got real close and told her this would be a huge help later on. The girl can't let anything get her down. Now it's time for her to open her eyes. The queen called out Hari's name, and a bright blue light enveloped the heroine, pulling her back to reality. Evgenia slowly opened her eyes. She immediately felt someone holding her hand. Realizing it was Lord Enric, the girl jumped up, and the man felt a wave of relief that Evgenia was awake. The girl immediately started searching for the brooch, but the Duke calmed her down, saying he'd taken it off temporarily while he was taking care of her. He immediately returned the jewel, the very thing Evgenia risked her life for. The heroine realized she hadn't been thinking about that lately, because things were happening that weren't in the original story. But the fact that she knew about herbs and heard strange voices had to be connected to the fairies. But where was she supposed to find that stone? They said they'd only leave Evgenia with the memories she needed. Suddenly, Enric touched the girl's forehead. He asked, all worried, how she was doing, and felt that her fever was gone. Being that close to him made her totally freak out, and she blurted out that it was a little chilly in here. Henrik handed her a wooden mug and told her to drink some warm water. Evgenia asked when the rain would stop, and he said it didn't look like it was letting up anytime soon. She was bummed that Joshua and Selmia were so stressed out about her. "Me too," Henrik said, kinda sharp. He explained that he'd been worried too, and that's why he didn't get why she always acted so reckless. Catching herself, she immediately started thanking him for saving her. And then she added that she always tries to be careful. She explained that when kids are involved, her body just kicks into overdrive, and she can't help it. This feels like young love. Henrik knew damn well those two were important to her. Tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, he asked her not to forget that she was the most important person to someone else too. Evgenia promised, and this time, he chose to believe her. She eagerly reminded the Duke that she'd never lied to him, And that was the truth. She always told him everything, but knew so little about him. It made her heart ache. He said his story wasn't all that interesting, so she asked him to at least tell her about his childhood. Henrik finally agreed, saying this would be the first and last time he'd tell her his somewhat dark story. The Duke began his story by saying he didn't have a mother. The previous Dukes hadn't had any kids for a long time, and since they were the only ones left in the family, they needed a way to get an heir. Enrique just got lucky they spotted him, 'cause with the plague epidemic, orphans were a dime a dozen. Thanks to the Duke and Duchess, the kid wasn't starving anymore. He didn't have to sweat just surviving day to day. That's why Enrique decided he was going to be the best damn son he could be. That way, he'd definitely be worthy of these good people who took him in and cared for him. And that's how the little guy lived for a few years, until Mom finally had the son she'd always wanted, a boy named Jade. And, as messed up as it sounds, when his brother was born, Enrique started wondering if he could still stay here. Those thoughts pushed him to become an officer. Both parents were against it, saying he was just the younger brother. But Enrique ended up joining the military academy anyway. Since he was the best knight in the Ace Empire, they assigned him to Chatton. It was tough, but the guy didn't regret it. He finally felt like he'd found his place. The main character figured the gloves were because of injuries he got during training. Deciding to take a shot, Eugenia asked if she could see. The guy said they looked awful. The main character carefully took off the glove and saw Henrik's hand, completely covered in scars. No matter how good the Duke and Duchess are, there's still such a thing as social standing. Henrik had been working his tail off alone all this time. Since Miss Eugenia's seen them, that's enough of that. But the main character grabbed his hand tighter and told him not to hide it. These scars are proof of how hard Henrik's life has been. It's something to be proud of, not hide. The hero looked totally bewildered when she said they were beautiful. Yeah, Henrik said, intertwining his fingers with Eugenia's hand. Then he gently kissed her hand, never breaking eye contact with the main character, and added, "If you say so, then it must be true." Shock immediately flashed across Eugenia's face. Seeing the main character's reaction, the guy asked, "Am I not allowed to hold your hand?" Eugenia shyly said no, and a happy grin instantly spread across Henrik's face. Then he told the main character, "If you'll let me, I'll definitely find a way to stay with you, so please trust me." Eugenia was surprised that Henrik was picturing a future with her. Trying to hide her embarrassment, she assured him, "I'm really good at waiting, so you just need to hurry up and finish the story." Nodding, the guy explained that he'd been working at Chateau ever since, until he got some news. That day, just like today, it was raining. Henrik managed to get home fast after hearing the terrible news. He walked into the room and saw his mother in mourning clothes, just standing there staring at a snow-white towel. Hearing the footsteps, she turned her head, and Henrik saw the desperation in her eyes. Elvery explained to Henrik that his father and Jade had fallen into the river. Ever since Mr. Jade got that pony, he loved riding, so when the rain stopped, he went out with his father. But the rain had really washed out the ground, and His Excellency immediately jumped in after him. But in the end, they both drowned. When Madame Jacqueline saw Henrik in the doorway, she froze. Then she rushed at him, screaming like crazy, asking why he did it, why he gave her baby that pony. If it wasn't for him, her son Jade would still be alive. Henrik stopped mid-sentence, a voice in his head screaming it was all his fault Jade and the boss were dead. Seeing the look on his face, Evgenia asked, worried, "Hey, you okay? Don't keep going if this is too much," she said. "You don't have to talk about it." But he insisted he was fine, even though she could see he was totally freaking out. She immediately hugged him. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have pushed you like that." "Don't push yourself too hard," she told him. Henrik gently pulled back, saying quietly, "I should have gotten Jade a different gift." Things would be different now. If he'd lost Evgenia too, if he'd been even a second later, Henrik wouldn't be able to go on living. The heroine gently took his hand. "This isn't your fault, Henrik. He got his little brother a pony, opened the floodgates. But you can't predict how life's gonna go down. It's always a wild card. Besides, the Duke did save her." The main character knelt right in front of him, insisting it was all him. So, to put Lord Henrik's mind at ease, the young woman promised to be extra careful from now on. Still, the Duke reminded Eugenia that she's always reckless. A faint smile touched Henrik's lips as the main character huffed, annoyed, that she was being serious right now. The two locked pinkies, and she promised. She meant it this time. Once they were all safely across the river, the Duke apologized for making everyone worry. He ordered Cedric to get this whole mess cleaned up and keep an eye on the river territory until further notice. Then, Enric asked Eugenia to go back and rest, since she still wasn't feeling well, and she obeyed. Jenny immediately rushed over to the girl, asking how she was, and said that the young master and lady were at the mansion right now. Eugenia asked how they were doing, and the maid said they'd been crying so much they were completely exhausted. Enrique called out to Cedric and Elvry and asked them to take care of moving Eugenia to the main mansion. A fever like that doesn't just go away, so we need to call the family doctor. And Elvry has something he needs to check out. Someone deliberately made a hole in the ferry Eugenia was on. When Enrique inspected it a few days ago, there was nothing like that. When the Duke jumped into the water, he managed to spot the hole in the bottom of the overturned boat. Elvry wasn't surprised at all. Even in such a critical moment, His Excellency hadn't forgotten about things like that. The Duke asked his assistant to find proof, no matter the cost. After a while, the main character started to seriously doubt she should be using such a luxurious room. She was told that Enrique had assigned these chambers to her, but for a regular maid, this was way too much. The family doc whipped up some medicine for Eugenia to bring down the fever, and since there weren't any other injuries, he was done. As soon as the guy left, the young woman realized she was dead tired. But first, gotta return the brooches, 'cause the twins were freaking out. Just then, she heard little footsteps coming towards the room. Joshua and Selmia burst in right away, all worried, asking Eugenia if she was okay and how she was feeling. The kids immediately rushed to hug her, and the main character, kinda flustered, assured them she was fine and they didn't need to worry. Joshua immediately started saying it was all his fault, that if it wasn't for that darn gemstone, none of this would have happened. Kneeling down, Eugenia started calming the kids, saying it wasn't Joshua's fault, so there was no need to cry. Eugenia held out the brooches, which she managed to deliver safe and sound. The twins froze as soon as they touched the main character's hand. Joshua just blew up, asking why Evangeline was acting so out of pocket. Did she forget her meds or something? They were both so worked up about the lead's decision that she figured she needed to change the subject ASAP. Spotting a book by Selma's feet, Evangeline asked the twins if they wanted her to read to them. But the little one firmly said she brought the book so she could read to Evangeline tonight, since the girl always reads them bedtime stories. This time, Selma decided to do the reading, so Evangeline could get some rest. The little one patted the pillow next to her and eagerly told the girl to hurry up and lie down. The lead gave a big smile and thought to herself how adorable Selma was. Once everyone was settled, the young lady opened the book. Now she could start reading the story about fairies. Way back when, deep in the darkest woods, lived a fairy queen. She hung out with bears and bunnies, the grass and the butterflies. Then one day, a lost traveler stumbled in, begging her to grant his wish and help him find his way home. The guy missed his family so bad, he couldn't stop crying, but the queen couldn't leave the forest. So she decided to loan him some jewels. Wish to get out of the forest on one turquoise stone, and the other will become legs to help you escape from here. But you gotta bring 'em back later, no exceptions. The traveler was stoked and thanked the fairy queen right away. Thanks to the fairy queen's help, he got out of the woods and reunited with his family. Selmia closed the book, since the story was over. The main character asked, confused, if that was really it, because the story didn't say whether the traveler returned the jewels. Joshua was thinking, figuring the book had no other ending, but Selmia was sure the stones got returned. Eugenia totally got it. This was definitely the same story, the one the fairy queen told her back when she was out cold. Plus, the pattern on that turquoise stone gave her the feeling she'd seen it somewhere before. Joshua just shrugged, said it was a fairy tale, only good for kids. Eugenia smiled, told him he was still a kid himself, but he insisted he'd grown up a long time ago. Eugenia's eyes went to the brooch, while the young master offered Selmia a candy. Come to think of it, the brooch is turquoise too. Could the traveler from the fairy tale have been one of Marquis Keratin's ancestors? Besides, she only started hearing voices after she ran into those gemstones. Maybe the truth will come out if she touches him again. But then, out of nowhere, a guy walks in asking if Joshua and Selmia are around. Teacher Eileen beamed as soon as she spotted the twins she'd been looking for forever. I noticed Selmia clinging to me tighter the second the little one saw the teacher. I tensed up and asked Eileen what brought her here, and she, acting like she just noticed me, asked how I was doing. Eileen had heard the maid was back, but she was so frazzled she only just got here. I asked, totally deadpan and a little skeptical, if the teacher was actually worried about me. Eileen stepped closer, touched Selmia, and said with a smile that I'd done a really good job. I immediately told the twins I needed to chat with their teacher about something, so I asked them to give us a minute. I promised them everything was cool and it wouldn't take long. The twins hopped off the bed, and the teacher asked the sweet little darlings to wait for her a sec. But Joshua dodged Eileen's hand and told Sally to hurry up. As soon as the kids were out of the room, the teacher smiled and called them cuties. Now that Eugenia was alive and kicking, and the kids were safe, Eileen was about to leave too. But the blonde asked her to hold on. But the teacher clearly wasn't going to do that, so our main character had to grab her arm. She told Eileen they needed to have a chat. Shaking off our main character's hand, the teacher agreed there was definitely something to talk about. Then she pointed at Eugenia and said that girl was just jealous of how close she was to the kids. A simple maid might not get it, but Eileen insisted she lay off trying to get in good with her children. Since Eugenia was a maid, she should be like all the other servants, quiet as a mouse. The main character had enough and slapped Aileen across the face. The teacher stared at her, stunned, and asked in disbelief if a maid had just hit her. Eugenia didn't deny it. Convinced Aileen was pretending not to notice Ranville throwing away the brooches. The teacher immediately swung back, yelling, "What in the world are you talking about?" Catching her hand, the main character declared that Aileen was jealous of her connection with the twins, not the other way around. She deliberately took the kids with her and purposely didn't look for the brooch, so that when Eugenia went searching, she'd be swept away by the current. Since the maid was making such bold accusations, Aileen demanded some kind of proof. As soon as Eugenia said she had it, the teacher told her not to lie, claiming she'd covered her tracks. Realizing what she'd said, she immediately clapped a hand over her mouth. Getting closer, the main character asked Aileen if she knew what she'd seen on that ferry. The teacher took a step back and asked the girl, bewildered, what she was talking about. She subtly grabbed the vase, just as Eugenia revealed she'd seen a valuable item there, one the teacher had left behind. Aileen immediately swung and demanded the maid answer her right now, or else shut her mouth forever. The main character squeezed her eyes shut and started to shield herself with her hands. But the blow never came, because Henrik suddenly appeared, grabbed the teacher's arm, and harshly asked what she was doing. The woman yelled that she didn't start it. Eugenia hit her first, and she was just trying to give her the discipline she deserved. Henrik's jaw tightened as he demanded to know what right Aileen Blair had to punish anyone. The teacher froze, hearing the Duke's icy tone. If I were Henrik, I'd be more careful and wouldn't so carelessly reveal all the cards I'm holding. Eileen was clueless what the Duke was on about, but he snatched the vase from her and said she'd figure it out soon enough. The teacher froze solid the second Henrik said there was a hole in the ferry somehow, and that it was no accident. If they find out who did it, like Eileen said, the Duke's gotta make sure they pay the price. The vase slipped right out of Henrik's hands and shattered into a million pieces. The main character never would have guessed that Aiden would try to bean her with a vase. She got super lucky Henrik stopped the teacher, 'cause things could have gotten real ugly. Eugenia assured the Duke she was fine, and the teacher didn't even lay a finger on her. She choked up when Henrik told her she did good for slapping Eileen across the face. The guy promised he'd handle the fallout, so Eugenia could feel free to get rough when she needed to. But not when it's totally unnecessary. The main character chuckled softly, then remembered the hole in the boat the Duke mentioned earlier. The man nodded and explained he'd seen an axe mark on the bottom of the boat, meaning someone deliberately sabotaged it. Eugenia wondered why the boat was in pieces. Could Eileen really have done this? The Fairy Queen's request is important, but we need to deal with this more pressing matter first. The heroine asked to loosen the guard around the area tonight because she set a trap. The culprit will soon reveal their true colors. Late that night, opening the door, the girl noticed the guards were gone. Eileen figured the stars were aligning in her favor. Little did the girl know, Eugenia saw something that made her absolutely certain she was trying to off her. Gotta find it quick. As soon as it's exposed, I'm done for. The teacher rummaged through the nightstand, wondering where it was and where Eugenia had stashed it. Looking for something, maybe? A voice cut through the room, freezing Aileen in her tracks. Turning around, she saw Eugenia, the Duke, the butler, and that creepy maid. A chuckle escaped the tutor's lips. Glancing at the flower in the heroine's hand, Aileen said she had no idea what the girl was talking about. The heroine told her to drop the act. Nobody else had a flower like that. Aileen knew the maid had it out for her, but Eugenia was really pushing it now. She just wants to keep harassing her for no reason. But there are tons of flowers like that. But the heroine explained that orange flowers don't grow anywhere in the Eurasian territories. They're native to a port city in the southern Holland Duchy, so nobles use them when they propose. Of everyone in the mansion, Aileen's tutor is the only one who's been through that city. So basically, the girl got a marriage proposal. Aileen told her to knock it off, but Eugenia kept pushing, telling the teacher to stop beating around the bush. The brunette's voice cracked as she screamed, asking how a common maid dared to touch something like that. Henrik stepped forward, shielding Eugenia with his arm, and the teacher blurted out that the guy gave her that flower. The weather was clear then, but the wind was howling, so Aileen asked Count Landra to get inside quickly, but she noticed the guy start to hesitate. Taking the girl's hand, the Count said that Aileen was the only one who actually cared about him. He kissed her hand and asked if she'd considered his offer to become a real family. But Aileen reminded him that she was just a simple caretaker, and besides, his late wife might be thinking of him. The guy just said that those left behind only feel crushing loneliness. So, Count Landry was looking to ditch that loneliness ASAP. Handing Aileen the flower, he asked if she could maybe help him out with that. And wouldn't you know it, the young woman took him up on the offer, agreeing to become his lovely wife. Hearing that, a smile crept across the guy's lips under that eye patch. Snapping out of the memory, Aileen broke down, screaming that the man said he loved her. Count Landry asked her to start a family and then dumped her because she couldn't have kids. The young woman couldn't even figure out why. She couldn't have a baby. The main character didn't recognize him, so Enric explained he used to be the commander of the Night Order. He's tight with the ministers, so he's not the kind of guy who'd let just anyone cross the border. After Eileen Blair got canned from the Carrot and Marcus family, she landed a job working for the Landry County. He was giving Eileen birth control, since he already had an heir growing up, and he didn't want another kid. Enrico felt bad the heroine had to go through all that. But that doesn't mean Joshua and Selmia can become her kids. Eileen screamed like crazy that she raised and taught those kids. How dare some maid just take her place? She promised she wouldn't let the twins go for anything. Suddenly, Selmia ran into the room and yelled like a banshee for the teacher to shut her trap. Because she's Mom Mia's daughter. Clutching the main heroine, the girl said through tears that her family is keratin. Joshua walked into the room and backed up Selmia's words. They trusted and followed the teacher, but they never thought of her as a replacement for Mom. Elvery apologized to the master and explained that the young master and young lady had insisted on coming themselves. Eileen couldn't believe what she was hearing. Snapping his fingers, Duke Enric informed Eileen Blair that he wouldn't listen to her excuses anymore. From this moment on, the teacher is banished. Eileen shouldn't even think about setting foot on Juraceous soil again. The teacher immediately demanded to be released and asked Joshua and Selmia to come to their mother. The main character hugged the twins and began to comfort them, promising that everything would be over soon. However, Eileen continued to resist, shouting that they couldn't treat her like this. But no one listened to her, so the door slammed shut, muffling the former teacher's screams. It was noisy in the mansion, so Eugenia was worried about the children. But they reminded her that she hadn't recovered yet herself. Joshua assured her that they were fine, so she didn't need to worry about them. So, the main character suggested cocoa in bedtime, but you're not supposed to drink that stuff at night, so it's their little secret. Selmia was stoked, because that meant her big sis was going to sleep with them tonight. They could do this thanks to their great aunt on their mom's side. The little one confessed that, all this time, Miss Eileen had been giving her the creeps. Just mentioning Eugenia's name, she'd instantly get this look on her face and try to keep them apart. Joshua kind of figured something was up, but he didn't realize Miss Eileen was so possessive, like they were her own kids or something. The main character promised the kids they had nothing to worry about anymore. She'd protect them from anything. That's why the twins can trust her. Joshua gave a subtle nod, and Selmia happily shouted that of course they trusted her. Hearing that, the main character suggested turning off the lights, and Selly immediately piped up that she was sleeping next to her big sis. Evgenia hugged the little ones, wished them good night, and promised tomorrow would be even more awesome. The next day at the meeting, Henrik coldly announced that he couldn't hide his disappointment. He set up this training so these kids could grow into exceptional people, even bringing in the Empire's top mentors. And they had the nerve to screw it all up, even knowing how valuable this opportunity was. The barons totally understood his lordship's anger, but they still asked him to calm down, saying it was just kids being kids. Henrik's tone got even colder as he informed them that someone almost got seriously hurt. Not only were they messing with their parents' stuff, but instead of correcting them, the fathers are covering up their actions. The Duke has made his decision. All training sessions are cancelled, and the plans to choose an heir from the side branch are completely scrapped. With that, the meeting was over, so Henrik headed for the exit, telling everyone to clear the room immediately. He wasn't about to entrust this family to those who didn't even deserve to be called human. Anyone who doesn't leave on time will be considered banished from the family. And with that, Henrik dismissed them. A little later, Elvry told his lordship that he'd really had it up to here dealing with those shameless people. Instead of answering, Henrik asked his assistant if he'd taken care of that matter. Elvry reported that Lady Eileen had been sent to a convent on the edge of the empire, just like he ordered, and he'd be checking on her condition. The assistant thought to himself that Eugenia was either too kind or way too soft. The girl herself had asked Elvry days earlier to give that flower to the teacher so she could handle things herself. But Eugenia had insisted that Elvry not say a word to Lord Henrik. Elvry did as the girl asked and told his lordship that he would now return to his duties. Opening the door, the assistant noticed an unexpected guest. Without looking up, Henrik asked the child what brought him here. Joshua stood his ground and told his uncle he had something to say. The Duke asked what was on his mind, but the young master suddenly got all flustered. Guts gathering, the kid blurted out that he wanted to learn swordsmanship too. Henrik promised to find him a fencing instructor, saying if that's what he wanted, he'd pick one of the best knights in Jerez. But that wasn't good enough for Joshua, 'cause he wanted his uncle to teach him. It wasn't a big deal, but the Duke didn't get why, and the kid immediately exclaimed he wanted to protect those he cared about. This time, he explained how helpless he felt, even though he was young. That's probably why people underestimate him. Eugenia was someone close to Joshua, but he couldn't protect her, no matter how much he wanted to. That's why he needed strength now, 'cause he couldn't just keep being the one who needed saving. The Duke figured the young master was looking to get back at Baron Moline. Joshua declared he wouldn't be played for a fool anymore, so Enric decided to ask one last question. Why him? Crossing his arms, the kid casually replied it was obvious, since his uncle was the strongest dude around. Perfect, Enric said quietly, then announced he would be the one to train him. So, right now, Joshua needed to follow him. The boy's face lit up, and he immediately took off after his uncle. First thing, they headed to the armory, where Enric told the young master to pick out whatever weapon he liked. Joshua made his choice quick. He wanted to learn with twin blades. Those were Jerez family heirlooms, and the kid's choice made the Duke think Joshua had good taste. The boy was stunned when his uncle handed him a wooden sword and suggested he start with that. Henrik explained that the real blade was way too dangerous to start with, but Joshua was ready to get his hands dirty for Evgenia. With that kind of attitude, the kid's definitely going to be a great swordsman someday. But rushing things won't make him stronger. Until the day he's worthy to wield those blades, Henrik's going to hold on to him. And until then, the Duke was ready to protect Joshua's loved ones. Clutching the wooden swords, the kid promised his uncle he'd do everything he said. Henrik gave a slight smile and suggested they start with the first lesson. Joshua was taken aback when the man suddenly told him to address him properly, because he wasn't going to keep calling him uncle. The young master immediately bowed to his teacher and politely asked him to continue guiding him. Henrik shook the kid's hand and said he was counting on him too. Joshua was floored when the Duke, just out of the blue, told him to run 50 laps around the training field. So, Henrik asked if his student couldn't handle it, but Joshua wasn't about to back down. After a while, the guy knocked on the door and announced to his dear mother that it was him. Hearing her son's voice, Lady Nellie looked up from her book and immediately told Enric to come in, all happy. The Duke instantly apologized for interrupting her reading, but she was quick to reassure him, saying she was just getting bored anyway. They decided to have some tea, and that's when Enric explained he'd come with one goal, to talk to his mom. The thing is, he needs her help and support. Lady Nellie was taken aback by Enric's words, and he added that this was super important, which is why he was asking for her help. The guy was dead serious, even ready to beg. Her son, who hadn't asked for help even once since that day, now needed it. Lady Nellie remembered perfectly how she'd blamed Enric that day for her son's death, all because of that cursed horse he'd given him. She was out of her mind with grief then, not thinking straight at all. The second she realized what she'd said, she wanted to take it back, tell him that wasn't what she meant at all. But Enric just lowered his head and mumbled a quick apology, and then he left the room without another word. Lady Nellie was left alone, realizing she'd just screwed up big time, like, irreparably screwed up. After that, she could barely even look at Enric. She was too busy trying to fill the hole left by her husband's death. Every time she saw Enric, she was terrified she'd start blaming him again in her grief over Jade. By the time she calmed down, she figured it was too late, that she'd blown her chance. But guess she was being too optimistic. Lady Nellie smiled gently and asked Henrik to never forget that he was her son, her greatest pride. If there's anything she can do for him, she'll give it her all and help him out. After all, she's his mother, and Henrik is her precious son. The Duke's lips curved into a subtle smile, and he thanked his mother for her words. Holding her son's hand, the woman told him not to thank her, and instead tell her what Henrik wanted to talk about. The man explained that it was something that would change the rest of his life. He revealed his plan to the noble lady, and she listened in surprise. After he finished, the woman understood why Henrik jumped into the river last summer. He wanted to save that kid. However, she explained that this path wouldn't be easy, but Henrik already knew that and wasn't about to back down. This is the only path he can take. The noble lady smiled and told her son that if he was so set on it, then so be it. She understood his resolve. But this wasn't something to rush into, so Lady Nellie suggested he think it over calmly. There's been no response from the other side yet. The main character was surprised to learn that Lady Nellie wanted to send young Lady Selmia to the estate in the south of the empire. The woman believed that place would be suitable for Selmia, so now she was curious to hear Eugenia's opinion. However, the main character thought that the young lady's and young master's opinions were more important than hers. Lady Nellie agreed and admitted that she had already spoken with the children. Selmia was absolutely thrilled. She'd never seen the ocean, so she was already looking forward to the trip. But Joshua, on the other hand, is unhappy because he won't be able to practice fencing at the estate. The main character mentally agreed. Lately, Joshua looks happy, and Selmia will be better off in the south than here. It's warm there, no need to bundle up in a ton of clothes. Now that things have calmed down a bit, everyone should do what makes them happy, so Eugenia said she'd pack everything. Out of the blue, Lady Nellie asked the girl if she wanted to tag along. An old friend of hers lives down south. Countess Fecia left high society after some rough stuff and is now chilling in seclusion. Inside, our girl was stoked about the offer, but she knew she hadn't found any leads on the Fairy Queen yet. If Lady Nellie wants her to go, she will. But the woman told Eugenia she doesn't have to go if she doesn't want to. Our girl thanked her for understanding. If the young master stays, he'll need someone to look after him. Lady Nellie said that in that case, she'd head out in a week. For some reason, hearing that, a shadow of sadness crossed our girl's face. Time flew faster than she thought, and before she knew it, 2 weeks had passed since Lady Nellie and Selmia left the Duchy of Harris. No sooner did the lady hop on that train south than Henrik and Zion started ditching out together all the time. But because of Joshua's official lessons, they were back at the mansion every 3 days, which meant the main character barely even saw them. A little voice kept saying His Excellency's business would wrap up soon. Just hang in there. But who knew when soon would actually arrive? Suddenly, Eugenia heard the head butler clapping his hands. Cedric ordered all the servants to get to their stations, pronto. An important guest was arriving, and there couldn't be a single screw-up in the reception. The main character was racking her brain, wondering who it could be that would warrant gathering all the servants. The side branch of the family wouldn't just show up. A stunning woman with long crimson hair crossed the threshold, and the butler announced that Her Highness had traveled a long way. The first princess of the Asher Kingdom figured everyone was probably surprised by her sudden visit. Still, she's totally digging this warm welcome. The princess walked over to the butler, remembering his name was Cedric. But looking around, she realized she didn't see anyone else. So Cedric explained that Lady Nellie had gone to the southern estate. It happened a few days ago, so the princess felt bad and asked where the Duke was. Just then, Enric rushed in and apologized to Her Highness for being late. The princess was immediately happy and told the man it had been ages since they'd seen each other, then held out her hand. Looking away, Enric replied that everything was fine. Then he kissed Her Highness's hand, apologizing for his disheveled appearance. The princess smiled and told the Duke not to worry, since they were cool with each other. Enric thanked Her Highness, and then suddenly a maid standing among the others caught his eye. Eugenia looked totally lost, her eyes glued to the floor. The princess told the Duke he was still the same and asked him to just call her Canaria, but Enric couldn't bring himself to do it. She called him a stick in the mud, but admitted that's exactly what she liked about him. Meanwhile, our girl was watching the smiling princess and the Duke, who was all ears. Questions started swirling in her head. Why was she reacting like this? Were they close? And why did she even care? Mr. Xian snapped Eugenia out of her thoughts, popping up out of nowhere and asking what she was spacing out about. Right now, she looked like she was ready to absolutely lose it on the next person who crossed her path. Eugenia awkwardly brushed it off, saying he was just imagining things. Suddenly, she noticed Enric was staring right at her, giving her the stink eye. She didn't get why the Duke was so ticked off. It had been ages since they'd seen each other. Henrik was stunned when Miss Eugenia turned her back on him, plain as day. Mr. Xian couldn't hold back his laughter, which just confused the heck out of the main girl. Princess Canaria asked Sweet Henrik what he was staring at, but he played it cool, said nothing was up. Looking away, the guy asked Her Highness what brought her here unannounced. Canaria explained to Henrik that he wouldn't have listened even if she'd sent a letter. If he'd known everything, he definitely would have told her to stay away. Henrik explained that it was gonna start snowing real soon, so Her Highness better head back quick, before she caught a cold. Canaria didn't see what the big deal was. Plus, she'd traveled straight through, without a single day of rest, just to see Henrik. Couldn't the guy spare her even one night? The Duke bowed and explained to the princess that he'd been swamped with urgent business lately and was often away from the mansion. Henrik apologized to Her Highness for not being able to escort her personally, and then, without waiting for a response, bowed and left. The butler immediately approached the princess and informed her that he would take care of her reception while her chambers were being prepared, and that she could warm up in the drawing room. Canaria hid her displeased expression behind her fan, but then she quickly plastered on a smile and asked for some hot tea. The butler immediately went to fulfill her request, and Canaria, with a sly smile, said that since the Duke was so concerned about her, she would return the favor. After the meeting with the princess, Henrik immediately summoned Eugenia to him. The man asked why she wasn't looking at him, to which the main character replied that she was just in a mood. Henrik nodded, accepting the answer. And then, approaching closer, he unexpectedly asked if the girl had no questions for him. Of course, there were questions. Eugenia didn't understand who this girl was, and what her connection to the Duke might be. Why do they seem so chummy? And is there something going on between Enric and this guest? But all Eugenia asked was if she should be worried about this lady showing up. Enric immediately said no and swore to her that would never happen. The main girl felt relieved and barely smiled, saying that would be enough. But her tone and the look on her face were kinda off. Eugenia turned around right away, saying she had to go. But Enric stopped her, shouting her name. He reminded her that if she gave him some time, he'd definitely figure a way out of this mess. Those weren't just empty words he was saying. Enric promised that there's really nothing between him and the princess, and that's why he kept things to himself, to protect her. The main girl totally got that Mr. Enric could easily brush off the rumors, but she couldn't. The guy gently took Evgenia's hand and confessed he didn't want to drift apart from her over stuff like this. So, he practically begged her to give him even a tiny bit of confidence in her heart, so he could be more decisive. Henrik knew perfectly well he couldn't rush things, but he just couldn't help himself. There's always been a distance between them. Neither the Duke nor Evgenia can ignore what other people think. But Henrik wanted to be closer to her, to laugh together, to share the little things, because these feelings are too strong to ignore. The Duke swore he'd find a way out, no matter the cost. Pulling Evgenia closer, the guy asked her to help him with this, because they can only find the answer together. The main character didn't get why she always tried to handle things alone, because with Henrik, she can make decisions easier. Lacing their fingers together, the Duke asked her to just trust him one more time. Evgenia gently touched his cheek, agreeing with what he said. And then she confessed that she was in love with him. Hearing those words, Henrik's breath caught in his throat, and his heart started pounding like crazy, filled with unbelievable joy. The man gently lifted Eugenia's chin and slowly leaned in towards her. A moment later, their lips met in a long-awaited kiss. The main character remembered a story Selmia had read to her, so she took out the brooches that were in the nightstand. As soon as the girl touched them, the room lit up with an intensely bright light, and glowing butterflies appeared all around. Gathering her courage, the main character asked where she needed to return the stone and learned that the butterflies lived in a deep forest. Then Eugenia asked what the deadline was for returning it. The butterfly said that when the next snow falls, the fairy queen will disappear, so she needs to make it before then. If Eugenia doesn't fulfill her promise by that time, the blessing that the fairy queen gave her will also vanish. So that means the main character's life is going to get cut short next winter too, even though she's only still around now because of the queen. The butterfly said it was time for her to go, 'cause she's weak in the winter, and then she faded into the air, blinding the girl with her light. The main character picked up the map and started looking for that forest from her childhood. But no luck. Plus, with Eugene wanted by the authorities, she didn't even know if she'd make it back in one piece. Even so, Eugene made it to Ace Empire without any trouble, so she's got to start somewhere, even if it's small. The princess's assistant told her there were twins living in the mansion. Canary was stunned and asked if they were Duke Enrico's kids, but the assistant explained they were born out of wedlock. The girl left with Lady Nellie to an estate in the south of the empire to lay low for a while, but the boy stayed here, so Duke Enrico himself started teaching him the art of fencing. The princess figured the Duke was really attached to this kid, which means she could take him under her wing. The next day, Canary couldn't figure out why she was running around since dawn. She was already dead tired. Joshua was super surprised to see Princess Asher. Canary handed the kid a towel and told him he was doing great. Then, the princess confessed she came to see Joshua on purpose, 'cause eating lunch alone is a drag. So, she asked the young master if he'd keep her company for lunch. Watching Joshua, our girl figured he was handling the whole hosting thing better than she thought he would. Out of the blue, the princess asked the blonde her name, and Eugenia immediately introduced herself. Canary decided not to beat around the bush and just straight up offered the maid a job working for her. With a dramatic sigh, the princess announced she needed a maid to wait on her while she was here. But our girl knew damn well it wasn't a suggestion. It was practically an order from a princess of a whole kingdom. Right then, Henrik saved Evgenia from having to answer, telling the princess she already had a perfectly good job. Canaria asked, all icy, if she couldn't even get something like this done. The right to assign servants belongs solely to the head of the family, Henrik explained. Raising her glass, the princess said the Duke was still the same stick in the mud as always. No fun to be had with him. And with that, they parted ways. 2 years ago, Canaria Asher lost her fight for the throne to her half-brother because he played dirty. She was going to accuse her brother of trying to poison her and hit back hard. But things went south real quick. Turns out, the poisoning left some lingering effects. Just like that, Canaria's fall happened in an instant, and the throne went to her younger half-brother. When the princess first met Duke Henrik, she immediately thought things were finally looking up. But now, it drove her nuts how he was always sticking up for that blonde. A few days later, Canary asked Penny where the Duke was. The maid said he'd been at the mansion 3 days ago, so he'd be back today. If Eugenia is assigned to Joshua, she'll have to be here every day. The princess understood that perfectly well. Soon, Duke Henrik and the young master returned and immediately greeted the princess. Canary immediately lit up with joy and told the man he was so hard to catch. She took a step towards him, but then, accidentally, tripped and fell right into his arms. Henrik asked if she was all right, saying it was dangerous to wear such shoes on a slippery floor. But Canary assured him she was fine. However, someone had recommended these shoes to her, saying they were slip-proof. The main character was stunned, because Her Highness was clearly and brazenly trying to pin this on her. But suddenly, Henrik told Her Highness that it was his fault. He should have made sure the princess's stay here was flawless, so this slip-up was on him. Canary smirked and said she'd let it slide this time. She was starting to think the Duke was way too cold, and figured he'd forgotten she was a princess of a whole kingdom. Henrik reminded her that they weren't engaged anymore. He's leaving again tomorrow, so he asked Her Highness one last time to get out of the mansion. Canary stepped closer to him and said she knew exactly how he felt when he wrote those letters last summer, so she wasn't going anywhere. A little while later, the main character went outside and saw the princess talking to Joshua. The boy wondered if Her Highness ever got bored watching him train, but she said it actually gave her a boost. But she couldn't stay for the whole training session today. She just stopped by to drop off a gift. Canary handed the young master a pair of matching swords as a small token of their friendship. "This is totally awesome," Joshua exclaimed, "'cause it's way too valuable a gift for him." The second gift was a blackbird in a cage. The princess explained this creature was a magical being, found in the kingdom of Ashur. Joshua couldn't hide his excitement when the bird soared into the sky and landed right on his shoulder. The kid promised he'd take good care of her, no question. Turns out this bird's name is Kozre. Joshua found it in a book he found in Mr. Enrich's library. Eugenia went to the library with Joshua and looked for info about magical creatures too, but didn't find anything too dangerous. All the really nasty magical creatures got taken care of by hunter squads a long time ago. So now all that's left are the ones you can keep as regular harmless pets. This bird's one of them. I bet the princess knew you could keep her as a pet. That's why she gave her to Joshua. The only thing they could find out was that when Kozri feels threatened or gets anxious, she can grow to be 10 times her size. If we smash the gem on her forehead right now, we can stop the transformation. The next morning, the kid was getting ready to train with his new blades, but Eugenia insisted he use his old ones. The kid grabbed the new blade and said he was old enough to handle it himself now. He pulled out a white cloth and started polishing the weapon. One wrong move, and Joshua's hand was sliced open on the razor-sharp edge, which really freaked out the main character. Suddenly, the birdcage shattered, and Kozri herself grew massively in size, and she was definitely not chill anymore. The main character was speechless. She didn't understand what was happening, because they hadn't been told this was even possible. To keep the giant bird from hurting Joshua, Eugenia jumped into the attack. She managed to buy a few extra seconds, enough time to run to Joshua and check on him. But Kors appeared in an instant, so the kid shoved Eugenia out of the way, and the bird's sharp talons tore across his shoulder blade. Realizing what just happened, Evgenia looked at the boy lying there, totally freaked out. She snatched him up in her arms and bolted, trying to get away from that dangerous bird. But the only place nearby was a walk-in closet, and now the main character was trapped. Meanwhile, the butler and Master Cheyenne heard a weird commotion coming from the room and rushed over to see what was going on. They threw open the door and immediately saw the massive bird. Cheyenne started yelling for Joshua and Evgenia, knowing they had to be around there somewhere. The main character's voice shot out from the closet, telling him that Master Joshua was badly hurt. Cheyenne didn't waste another second and drew his sword right away. But Kozri was fully grown now, so the master's swords just shattered against its head. The guy figured out that the bird was probably only reacting to the scent of blood, which meant its target was clear. The main character heard Lord Cheyenne's voice, telling her she needed to smash the stone on Kozri's forehead right now. Eugenia grabbed the broken hanger and realized if she didn't do it, no one else could save Joshua at this moment. So, she charged in and pierced the stone on the giant creature's forehead. Kozri immediately shrunk down, and the main character realized she'd actually done it. First things first, Eugenia laid Joshua on the bed and tried to wake him up. But since the wound was too serious, and the kid had already lost a lot of blood, the heroine whipped up some plant-based medicine for him. Through the pain, Joshua swallowed the medicine. Just then, the princess walked into the room, saying she'd heard a commotion, and asked what was going on. Seeing Her Highness, Eugenia immediately exclaimed, furious, why she'd given Joshua such a dangerous gift. However, Canaria replied that she'd already told him to be careful, saying that at the sight of blood, Canaria becomes difficult. Her assistant backed up the princess, saying if the maid didn't hear right, that's not on Her Highness. Canaria told the butler she'd given enough chances, so it was time to take action. The main character froze when Cedric ordered the guards to lock her in the storage room, pronto. It had been 2 days since Eugenia was locked up, and all she could think about was whether Joshua was doing okay. It was clear the princess was trying to pin the blame on Eugenia to avoid taking the heat for what happened, but it looks like she knew how the bird would react to blood. Suddenly, the main character realized that she was the princess's target all along. Right then, Canaria showed up in the storage room and snidely told Eugenia she looked like hell. The princess put on an act, saying it broke her heart that a sweet kid like Joshua got hurt. That's why she looked for a way to heal him. Canaria held out a page to Eugenia, a drawing of the eternal goodness plant, which can neutralize any poison. The main character knew about this flower. Lots of people had searched for it, but nobody ever found it, so it became a legend. The princess grabbed Eugenia by the chin and demanded she bring her the flower, and then she'd forgive her screw-ups. Right now, saving Joshua was the priority. If some people claimed to have seen the flower, it had to be out there, right? Eugenia remembered the Queen of the Fairies' blessing, which let her hear the whisper of every blade of grass. So the main character agreed to take on the job. Just in case, she grabbed the Queen of the Fairies' stone, which could point her to where the ice flower was. Before the girl left, the butler handed her something. You could easily get lost in the snowy mountains. It was a mountain thread woven from the wool of a magical beast. It's unbreakable. The main character thanked the butler for his kindness and told him not to worry too much. And then she set off to find that legendary flower, dead set on coming back and saving Joshua.